wife of Kardama Muni, became freed from all ignorance concerning devotional service and transcendental knowledge. She offered her obeisances unto the Lord, the author of the basic principles of Sankhya system of philosophy, which is the background of liberation, and she satisfied him with the following verses of prayer. Devahuti said, Brahma is said to be unborn because he takes birth from the lotus flower which grows from your abdomen while you lie in the ocean at the bottom of the universe. But even Brahma simply meditated upon you, whose body is the source of unlimited universes. My dear Lord, although personally you have nothing to do, you have distributed your energies to the interactions of the material modes of nature. And for that reason, the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation take place. My dear Lord, you are self-determined and are the Supreme Personality of Godhead for all living entities. For them, you created the material manifestation, and although you are one, your diverse energies can act multifariously. This is inconceivable to us. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you have taken birth from my abdomen. O my Lord, how is that possible for the Supreme One who has in his belly all the cosmic manifestation? The answer is that it is possible, for at the end of the millennium you lie down on a leaf of a banyan tree, and just like a small baby, you lick the toe of your lotus foot. My dear Lord, you have assumed this body in order to diminish the sinful activities of the fallen and to enrich their knowledge in devotion and liberation. Since the sinful people are dependent on your direction, by your own will you assume incarnations as a boar and as other forms. Similarly, you have appeared in order to distribute transcendental knowledge to your dependents. You say nothing of the spiritual advancement of persons who see the Supreme Person face to face. Even a person born in a family of dog-eaters immediately becomes eligible to perform Vedic sacrifices if he once utters the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or chants about him, hears about his pastimes, offers him obeisances, or even remembers him. Oh, how glorious are you! Those whose tongue are chanting your holy name. Even if born in the families of dog-eaters, such persons are worshipable. Persons who chant the holy name of your Lordship must have executed all kinds of austerities and fire sacrifices and achieved all the good manners of the Aryans. To be chanting the holy name of your Lordship, they must have bathed at holy places of pilgrimage, studied the Vedas, and fulfilled everything required. I believe, my Lord, that you are Lord Vishnu himself under the name of Kapila, and you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Brahman. The saints and sages, being freed from all the disturbances of the senses and mind, meditate upon you. For by your mercy only can one become free from the clutches of the three modes of material nature. At the time of dissolution, all the Vedas are sustained in you only. Thus, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Kapila, satisfied by the words of his mother, towards whom he was very affectionate, replied with gravity. The Personality of Godhead said, My dear mother, the path of self-realization, which I have already instructed you, is very easy. You can execute the system without difficulty, and by following it, you shall very soon be liberated, even without your present body. My dear mother, those who are actually transcendentalists certainly follow my instructions, as I have given them to you. You may rest assured that if you traverse this path of self-realization perfectly, surely you shall be freed from fearful material contamination and shall ultimately reach me. Mother, persons who are not conversant with this method of devotional service certainly cannot get out of the cycle of birth and death. Sri Maitreya said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Kapila, after instructing his beloved mother, took permission from her and left his home. his mission having been fulfilled. As instructed by her son, Devahuti also began to practice bhakti yoga in that very ashrama. She practiced samadhi in the house of Kardama Muni, which was so beautifully decorated with flowers that it was considered the flower's crown of the river Saraswati. She began to bathe 3 times daily, and thus her curling black hair gradually became grey. Due to austerity, her body gradually became thin, and she wore old garments. The home and household paraphernalia of Kardama, who was one of the Prajapatis, was developed in such a way by dint of his mystic powers of austerity in yoga, and his opulence was sometimes envied by those who travelled in outer space in airplanes. The opulence of the household of Kardama Muni is described herein. The bedsheets and mattresses were all as white as the foam of milk. The chairs and benches were made of ivory, and were covered by cloths of lace, with golden filigree, and the couches were made of gold and had very soft pillows. The walls of the house were made of first-class marble, decorated with valuable jewels. There was no need of light, for the household was illuminated by the rays of these jewels. The female members of the household were all amply decorated with jewelry. The compound of the main household was surrounded by beautiful gardens with sweet, fragrant flowers, and many trees which produced fresh fruit and were tall and beautiful. The attraction of such gardens was that singing birds would sit on the trees, and their chanting voices, as well as the humming sounds of the bees, made the whole atmosphere as pleasing as possible. When Devahuti would enter that lovely garden to take her bath in the pond filled with lotus flowers, she associated of the denizens of heaven. The Gandharvas would sing about Kardama's glorious household life. Her great husband Kardama gave her all protection at all times. Although her position was unique from all points of view, saintly Devahuti, in spite of all her possessions, which were envied even by the ladies of the heavenly planets, gave up all such comforts. She was only sorry that her great son was separated from her. Devahuti's husband had already left home and accepted the renounced order of life, and then her only son Kapila left home. Although she knew all the truths of life and death, and although her heart was cleansed of all dirt, she was very aggrieved at the loss of her son, just as a cow is affected when her calf dies. O Vidura, thus always meditating upon her son, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Kapila Deva, she very soon became unattached to her nicely decorated home. Thereafter, having heard with great eagerness and in all detail from her son Kapila Deva the eternally smiling personality of Godhead, Devahuti began to meditate constantly upon the Vishnu form of the Supreme Lord. She did so with serious engagement in devotional service. Because she was strong in renunciation, she accepted only the necessities of the body. She became situated in knowledge due to realization of the absolute truth. Her heart became purified. She became fully absorbed in meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all misgivings due to the modes of material nature disappeared. Her mind became completely engaged in the Supreme Lord, and she automatically realized the knowledge of the impersonal Brahman. As a Brahman realized soul, she was freed from the designations of the materialistic concept of life. Thus all material pangs disappeared, and she attained transcendental bliss. Situated in eternal trance and freed from illusion impelled by the modes of material nature, she forgot her material body, just as one forgets his different bodies in a dream. Her body was being taken care of by the spiritual damsels created by her husband, Kardama, and since she had no mental anxiety at that time, her body did not become thin. She appeared just like a fire surrounded by smoke, because she was always absorbed in the thought of Supreme Personality of Godhead. She was not aware that sometimes her hair was loosened or her garments were disarrayed. My dear Vidura, by following the principles instructed by Kapila, Devahuti soon became liberated from material bondage and achieved the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Super Soul without difficulty. The place where Devahuti achieved her perfection, elements of her body have melted into water and now a flowing river, which is the most sacred of all rivers. Anyone who bathes in that river also attains perfection, and therefore all persons who desire perfection go bathe there. My dear Vidura, the great sage Kapila, the personality of Godhead, left his father's hermitage with the permission of his mother and went towards the northeast. While he was passing in the northern direction, all the celestial dances known as Karanas and Gandharvas, as well as the Munis and the damsels of the heavenly planets, prayed and offered him all respects. The ocean offered him oblations and a place of residence. Even now Kapila Muni is staying there in trance for the deliverance of the conditioned souls of 3 worlds. And all of the acharyas, or great teachers of the system of Sankhya philosophy, are worshipping him. My dear son, since you have inquired from me, I have answered. O sinless one, the description of Kapila Deva and his mother and their activities are the purest of all pure discourses. The description of the dealings of Kapila Deva and his mother is very confidential, and anyone who hears or reads this narration becomes a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is carried by Garuda, and he thereafter enters into the abode of the Supreme Lord to engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Canto 4. The creation of the 4th order. Srimad Bhagavatam 4.1. Genealogical table of the daughters of Manu. Sri Maitreya said, Swayambhuva Manu begot 3 daughters in his wife Satarupa, and their names were Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. Akuti had 2 brothers, but in spite of her brothers, King Swayambhuta Manu handed her over to Prajapati Ruchi on the condition that the son born of her to be returned to Manu as his son. This he did in consultation with his wife, Satarupa. Ruchi, who was very powerful in his Brahmanical qualifications and was appointed one of the progenitors of the living entities, begot 1 son and 1 daughter by his wife Akuti. Of the 2 children born of Akuti, the male child was directly an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his name was Yajna, which is another name of Lord Vishnu. The female child was a partial incarnation of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, the eternal consort of Lord Vishnu. Swayambhuta Manu very gladly brought home the beautiful boy named Yajna, and Ruchi, his son-in-law, kept with him the daughter Dakshina. The lord of the ritualistic performance of Yajna later married Dakshina, who was anxious to have the personality of Godhead as her husband, and in this wife the Lord was also very much pleased to beget 12 children. The 12 boys born of Yajna and Dakshina were named Tosha, Patosha, Santosha, Bhadra, Shanti, Idaspati, Idma, Kavi, Vibhu, Svahana, Sudeva, and Rokana. During the time of Swayambhuta Manu, these sons all became the demigods, collectively named as Tushitas. Marichi became the head of the 7 rishis, and Yajna became the king of the demigods Indra. Swayambhuva Manu's 2 sons, Priyavrata and Uttanapada, became very powerful kings, and their sons and grandsons spread all over the 3 worlds during that period. My dear son, Swayambhuta Manu handed over this very dear daughter Devahuti to Kardama Muni, I have already spoken to you about them, and you have heard about them almost in full. Swayambhuva Manu handed over his daughter Prasuti to the son of Brahma, named Daksha, who was also one of the progenitors of the living entities. The descendants of Daksha are spread throughout the three worlds. You have already been informed about the 9 daughters of Kardama Muni, who were handed over to 9 different sages. I shall now describe the descendants of those 9 daughters. Please hear from me. Kardama Muni's daughter Kala, who was married to Marichi, gave birth to 2 children, whose names were Kashyapa and Purnima. Their descendants are spread all over the world, my dear Vidura. Of the 2 sons Kashyapa and Purnima, Purnima begot 3 children, namely Viraja, Vishvaga, and Devakulya. Of these 3, Devakulya was the water which washed the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, and which later on transformed into the Ganges and the heavenly planets. Anasuya, the wife of Atri Muni, gave birth to 3 very famous sons, Soma, Dattatreya, and Durvasa, who were partial representations of Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, and Lord Brahma. Soma was a partial representation of Lord Brahma. Dattatreya was a partial representation of Lord Vishnu, and Durvasa was a partial representation of Lord Shiva. After hearing this, Vidura inquired from Maitreya, "My dear master, how is it that the 3 deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, who are the creator, maintainer, and destroyer of the whole creation, became the offsprings of the wife of Atri Muni?" And Maitreya said, when Lord Brahma ordered Atri Muni to create generations after marrying Anasuya, Atri Muni and his wife went to perform severe austerities in the valley of the mountain known as Riksha. In that mountain valley flows a river named Nirvindhya. On the bank of the river are many ashoka trees and other plants full of palasa flowers, and there is always 3 sweet sound water flowing from a waterfall. The husband and wife reached that beautiful place. There the great sage concentrated his mind on the yogic breathing exercises, and thereby controlling all attachment, he remained standing on one leg only, eating nothing but air, and stood there on one leg for 100 years. He was thinking, "May the Lord of the universe, of whom I have taken shelter, kindly be pleased to offer me a son exactly like him." While Atri Muni was engaged in the severe austerities, a blazing fire came out of his head by virtue of his breathing exercise, and that fire was seen by the 3 principal deities of the 3 worlds. At that time, the 3 deities approached the hermitage of Atri Muni, accompanied by the denizens of the heavenly planets, such as the celestial beauties, the Gandharvas, the Siddhas, and the Vidyadharas and the Nagas. Thus they entered the ashrama of the great sage who had become famous by his austerities. The sage was standing on one leg, but as soon as he saw that the 3 deities had appeared before him, he was so pleased to see them all together that despite great difficulty he approached them on one leg. Thereafter he began to offer prayers to the 3 deities who were seated on different carriers, a bull, a swan, and Garuda, and who held in their hands a drum, kusha grass, and a discus. The sage offered them his respects by falling down like a stick. Atri Muni was greatly pleased to see that the 3 devas were gracious towards him. His eyes were dazzled by the effulgence of their bodies, and therefore he closed his eyes for the time being. But since his heart was already attracted by the deities, somehow or other he gathered his senses, and with folded hands and sweet words he began to offer prayers to the predominating deities of the universe. The great sage Atri said, O Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva, you have divided yourself into three bodies by accepting the three modes of material nature, as you do in every millennium for the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. I offer my respectful obeisances unto all of you, and beg to inquire from you. 3. I have called by my prayer. I called for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, desiring a son like him, and I thought of him only. But although he is far beyond the mental speculation of man, all three of you have come here. Kindly let me know how you have come, for I am greatly bewildered about this. The great sage Maitreya continued. Upon hearing Atri Muni speak in that way, the three great deities smiled, and they replied in the following sweet words. The three deities told Atri Muni, Dear Brahmana, you are perfect in your determination, and therefore as you have decided, so it will happen. It will not happen otherwise. We are all the same person upon whom you were meditating, and therefore we have all come to you. You will have sons who will represent a partial manifestation of our potency, and because we desire all good fortune for you, those sons will glorify your reputation throughout the world. Thus, while the couple looked on, the three deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara, disappeared from that place after bestowing upon Atri Muni the benediction. Thereafter, from the partial representation of Brahma, the moon god was born of them. From the partial representation of Vishnu, the great mystic Dattareya's son was born, and from the partial representation of Shankara, Lord Shiva, Durvasa was born. Now you may hear from me of the many sons of Angira. Angira's wife, Shraddha, gave birth to two sons. One of them was known as Uttahya, and the other was the learned scholar Brihaspati. Pulastya begot in his wife Havirbhu one son of the name Agastya, who in his next birth became Darangi. Beside him, Pulastya begot another very great and saintly son, whose name was Vishrava. Vishrava had two wives. The first wife was Idavida, from whom Kuvera, the master of all yakshas, was born, and the next wife was named Keshini, from whom three sons were born: Ravana, Kumbhakarna, and Vibhishana. Gati, the wife of the sage Pulaha, gave birth to the three sons named Karmashretha, Varyan, and Sahishnu, and all of them were great sages. Kratu's wife, Kriya, gave birth to 60,000 great sages, named the Valakhilya. All these sages were greatly advanced in spiritual knowledge, and their bodies were illuminated by such knowledge. The great sage Vasishtha begot in his wife Urja, sometimes called Arudhati. Even seven spotlessly great sages headed by the sage named Chitraketu. The names of these seven sages are as follows: Chitraketu, Surochi, Viraja, Mitra, Ulbana, Vasubhridyana, and Dyuman. Some other very competent sons were born from Vasishtha's other wife, Kitty, wife of the sage Atharva, gave birth to a son named Ashvashira by accepting a great vow called Dadhyancha. Now you may hear from me about the descendants of the sage Prigu. The sage Prigu was highly fortunate. In his wife known as Khyati, he begot two sons named Dhata and Vidhata, and other daughter named Shri, who was very much devoted to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The sage Meru had 2 daughters named Ayati and Niyati, whom he gave in charity to Datta and Vidatta. Ayati and Niyati gave birth to 2 sons, Mrikanda and Prana. From Mrikanda, Markandeya Muni was born, and from Prana, the sage Vedashira, whose son was Usana Shukracharya, also known as Kavi. Thus Kavi also belonged to the descendants of the Bhrigu dynasty. My dear Vidura, the population of the universe was thus increased by the descendants of 3 sages and the daughters of Kardama. Anyone who hears the descriptions of this dynasty with faith will be relieved from all sinful reactions. Another of Manu's daughters, known as Prasuti, married the son of Brahma named Daksha. Daksha begot 16 very beautiful daughters with lotus-like eyes in his wife Prasuti. Of these 16 daughters, 13 were given in marriage to Dharma, and 1 daughter was given to Agni. One of the remaining 2 daughters was given in charity to the Pitriloka, where she resides very amicably, and the other was given to Lord Shiva, who is the deliverer of sinful persons from material entanglement. The names of the 13 daughters of Daksha who were given to Dharma and Shraddha, Maitri, Daya, Shanti, Tusti, Pushti, Kriya, Unati, Buddhi, Medha, Titiksha, Hri, and Murti. These 13 daughters produced the following sons. Shraddha gave birth to Subha. Maitri produced Prasada. Daya gave birth to Abhaya. Shanti gave birth to Sukha. Tusti gave birth to Muda. Pushti gave birth to Smaya. Kriya gave birth to Yoga. Unati gave birth to Darpa. Buddhi gave birth to Artha. Medha gave birth to Smriti. Titiksha gave birth to Kshema. And Hri gave birth to Prashraya. Murti, a reservoir of all respectable qualities, gave birth to Sri Naranarayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. On the occasion of the appearance of Naranarayana, the entire world was full of joy. Everyone's mind became tranquil, and thus in all directions of the air, the rivers, and the mountains became pleasant. In the heavenly planets, bands began to play, and they showed flowers from the sky. The pacified sages chanted Vedic prayers. The denizens of heaven, known as the Gandharvas and Kinnaras, sang. The beautiful damsel of the heavenly planets danced. And in this way, and the time of the appearance of Naranarayana, all signs of good fortune were visible. Just at that time, great demigods like Brahma also offered their respectful prayers. The demigods said, "Let us offer our respectful obeisances unto the transcendental personality of Godhead, who created as his external energy this cosmic manifestation, which is situated in him, as the air and clouds are situated in space, and who has now appeared in the form of Naranarayana Rishi in the house of Dharma. Let that Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is understood by truly authorized Vedic literature, and who has created peace and prosperity to destroy all calamities of the created world, be kind enough to bestow his glance upon the demigods. His merciful glance can supersede the beauty of the spotless lotus flower, which is the home of the goddess of fortune." Maitreya said, "O Vidura, thus the demigods worshipped with prayers the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appearing as the sage Narayana. The Lord glanced upon them with mercy and then departed for Gandhamana hill. That Naranarayana Rishi, who is a partial expansion of Krishna, has now appeared in the dynasties of Yadu and Kuru in the forms of Krishna and Arjuna respectively, to mitigate the burdens of the world. The predominating deity of fire begot in his wife, Svaha, 3 children named Pavaka, Pavamana, and Suchi, who exist by eating the oblations offered to the fire of sacrifice. From those 3 sons, another 45 descendants were generated, who are also fire gods. The total number of fire gods is therefore 49, including the fathers and the grandfather. These 49 fire gods are beneficiaries of the oblations offered in the Vedic sacrificial fire by impersonalist Brahmanas. The Agnishvatas, the Barhishadas, the Saumyas, and the Ajapas and the Pitas, they are either Sangika or Niragnika. Sagnika or Niragnika. The wife of all these Pitas is Svadha, who is the daughter of King Daksha. Svadha, who was offered to the Pitas, begot 2 daughters named Vayuna and Dharini, both of whom were impersonalists and were expert in transcendental and Vedic knowledge. The 16th daughter, whose name was Sati, was the wife of Lord Shiva. She could not produce a child, although she always faithfully engaged in the service of her husband. The reason is that Sati's father Daksha used to rebuke Lord Shiva in spite of Shiva's faultlessness. Consequently, before attaining a mature age, Sati gave up her body by dint of yogic mystic power. Srimad Bhagavatam 4.2. Daksha curses Lord Shiva. Vidur inquired, why was Daksha, who was so affectionate towards his daughter, envious of Lord Shiva, who is the best among the gentle? Why did he neglect his daughter Sati? Lord Shiva, the spiritual master of the entire world, is free from enmity, is a peaceful personality and is always satisfied in himself. He is the greatest among the demigods. How is it possible that Daksha could be inimical towards such an auspicious personality? My dear Maitreya, to part with one's life is very difficult. Would you kindly explain to me how such a son-in-law and father-in-law could quarrel so bitterly that the great goddess Sati could give up her life? The sage Maitreya said, in a former time, the leaders of the universal creation performed a great sacrifice in which all the great sages, philosophers, demigods, and fire gods assembled with their flowers. When Daksha, the leader of the Prajapatis, entered that assembly, his personal bodily luster, as bright as effulgence of sun, the entire assembly was illuminated, and all the assembled personalities became insignificant in his presence. Influenced by his personal bodily luster, all the fire gods and all other participants in that great assembly, with the exceptions of Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, gave up their own sitting places and stood in respect of Daksha. Daksha was adequately welcomed by the president of the great assembly, Lord Brahma. After offering Lord Brahma respect, Daksha, by the order of Brahma, properly took his seat. Before taking his seat, however, Daksha was very much offended to see Lord Shiva sitting and not showing him any respect. At that time, Daksha became greatly angry, and his eyes glowing, he began to speak very strongly against Lord Shiva. All sages, Brahmanas, and fire gods present, please hear me with attention, for I speak about the manners of gentle persons. I do not speak of ignorance or envy. Shiva has spoiled the name and fame of the governors of the universe and has polluted the path of gentle manners. Because he is shameless, he does not know how to act. He has already accepted himself as my subordinate by marrying my daughter in the presence of fire and Brahmanas. He has married my daughter, who is equal to Gayatri, and has pretended to be just like the an honest person. He has eyes like a monkey's, yet he has married my daughter, whose eyes are just like those of a deer cub. Nevertheless, he did not stand up to receive me, nor did he think it fit to welcome me with sweet words. I had no desire to give him my daughter to this person, who has broken all rules of civility. Because of not observing the required rules and regulations, he is impure. But I was obliged to hand over my daughter to him, just as one teaches the messages of the Vedas to a Shudra. He lives in filthy places like crematoriums, and his companions are the ghosts and demons. Naked like a madman, sometimes laughing and sometimes crying, he smears crematorium ashes all over his body. He does not bathe regularly, and he ornaments his body with a garland of skulls and bones. Therefore, only in name is he Shiva or auspicious. Actually, he is the most mad and inauspicious creature. Thus, he is very dear to crazy beings in the gross mode of ignorance, and he is their leader. On the request of Lord Brahma, I handed over my chaste daughter to him, although he is devoid of all cleanliness, and his heart is filled with nasty things. The sage Maitreya continued. Thus Daksha, seeing Lord Shiva sitting as if against him, washed his hands and mouth and cursed him in the following words. The demigods are eligible to share in the oblations of sacrifice, but Lord Shiva, who is the lowest of all the demigods, should not have a share. Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, in spite of the request of all the members of the sacrificial assembly, Daksha, in great anger, cursed Lord Shiva and then left the assembly and went back to his home. Upon understanding that Lord Shiva had been cursed, Nandishvara, one of the Lord Shiva's principal associates, became greatly angry. His eyes became red, and he prepared to curse Daksha and all the Brahmanas present there who had tolerated Daksha's cursing Shiva in harsh words. Anyone who has accepted Daksha as the most important personality and neglected Lord Shiva because of envy is less intelligent, and because of visualizing the induality will be bereft of transcendental knowledge. Pretentiously religious householder life in which one is attracted to material happiness and thus also attracted to the superficial explanation of the Vedas robs one of all intelligence and attaches one to fruitive activities as all in all. Daksha has accepted the body as all in all. Therefore, since he has forgotten the Vishnupada matter by cultivating materialistic education and intelligence are nascently involved in fruitive activities. Such men have purposely insulted Lord Shiva. May they continue in the cycle of repeated birth and death. May those who are envious of Lord Shiva, being attracted by the flowery language of the enchanting Vedic promises, and who have thus become dull, always remain attached to fruitive activities. These Brahmanas take to education, austerity, and vows only for the purpose of maintaining the body. They shall be devoid of discrimination between what to eat and what not to eat. They will acquire money, begging from door to door, simply by the satisfaction of the body. For the satisfaction of the body. When all the hereditary Brahmanas were thus cursed by Nandishvara, the sage Bhrigu, as a reaction, condemned the flowers of Lord Shiva with his very strong Brahmanical curse. One who takes a vow to satisfy Lord Shiva or who follows such principles will certainly become an atheist and be diverted from transcendental scriptural injunctions. Those who vow to worship Lord Shiva are so foolish that they imitate him by keeping long hair on their heads. When initiated into lordship of Lord Shiva, they prefer to live on wine, flesh, and other such things. Bhrigu Muni continued. Since you blaspheme the Vedas and the Brahmanas who are followers of the Vedic principles, it is understood that you have already taken shelter of the doctrine of atheism. The Vedas give the eternal regulative principles for auspicious advancement in human civilization, which have been rigidly followed in the past. The strong evidence of this principle is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is called Janardana, the well-wisher of all living entities. By blaspheming the principles of the Vedas, which are the pure and supreme path of the saintly persons, certainly you followers of Bhutapari, Lord Shiva, will descend to the standard of atheism without a doubt. The sage Maitreya said, when such cursing and counter-cursing was going on between Lord Shiva's followers and the parties of Daksha and Bhrigu, Lord Shiva became very morose. Not saying anything, he left the arena of the sacrifice, followed by his disciples. The sage Maitreya continued, O Vidura, all the progenitors of the universal population thus executed a sacrifice for thousands of years, for sacrifice is the best way to worship the Supreme Lord, Hari, the personality of Godhead. My dear Vidura, carry your bows and arrows. All the demigods who were performing the sacrifice took their bath at the confluence of the Ganges and the Yamuna after completing the yajna performance. Such a bath is called Avabhrita Snana. After thus becoming purified in heart, they departed for their respective abodes. Srimad Bhagavatam 4.3 talks between Lord Shiva and Sati. Maitreya continued, in this manner, the tension between the father-in-law and son-in-law Daksha and Lord Shiva continued for a considerably long period. When Lord Brahma appointed Daksha the chief of all the Prajapatis, the progenitors of population, Daksha became very much puffed up. Daksha began a sacrifice named Vajapeya, and he became excessively confident in his support by Lord Brahma. He then performed another great sacrifice, named Brihaspati Sava. While the sacrifice was being performed, many Brahmarshis, great sages, ancestral demigods, and other demigods, their wives, all very nicely decorated with ornaments, attended from different parts of the universe. The chaste lady Sati, the daughter of Daksha, heard the heavenly denizens flying in the skies, conversing about the great sacrifice being performed by her father. When she saw that from all directions the beautiful wives of all heavenly denizens, their eyes very beautifully glittering, were near her residence and were going to the sacrifice dressed in fine clothing and ornaments with earrings and necklaces with locklets, she approached her husband, the master of the Bhutas, in great anxiety, and she spoke as follows. Sati said, my dear Lord Shiva, your father-in-law is now executing great sacrifices, and all the demigods have been invited by him. Are you going there? Are going there. If you desire, we may also go. I think that all my sisters might have gone to this great sacrificial ceremony with their husbands just to see their relatives. I also desire to decorate myself with the ornaments given to me by my father and go there with you to participate in that assembly. My sisters, my mother's sisters, and their husbands and other affectionate relatives must be assembled there, so if I go, I shall be able to see them, and I shall be able to see the flapping flags and the performance of the sacrifice by the great sages. For these reasons, my dear husband, I am very much anxious to go. This manifested cosmos in the wonderful creation of the interaction of the three material modes, or the external energy of the Supreme Lord. This truth is fully known to you, yet I am but a poor woman, and as you know, I am not conversant with the truth. Therefore, I wish to see my birthplace once more. O never born, O blue-throated one, not only my relatives, but also other women dressed in night clothes and decorated with ornaments are going there with their husbands and friends. Just see how their flocks of white airplanes have made the entire sky very beautiful. O best of demigods, how can the body of a daughter remain undisturbed when she hears that some festive event is taking place in your father's house? Even though you may be considering that I have not yet been invited, there is no harm if one goes to the house of one's friend, husband, spiritual master, or father without invitation. O immortal Shiva, please be kind. towards me and fulfill my desire. You have accepted me as half of your body. Therefore, please show kindness towards me and accept my request." The great sage Maitreya said, "Lord Shiva, the deliverer of the hill Kailasha, having thus been addressed by his dear wife, replied smilingly, although at the same time he remembered the malicious, heart-piercing speeches delivered by Daksha before the guardians of the universal affairs. The great Lord replied, "My dear beautiful wife, you have said that one may go to a friend's house without being invited, and this is true, provided such a friend does not find fault with the guests because of bodily identification, and thereby become angry towards him. Although the six qualities, education, austerity, wealth, beauty, youth, and heritage, are for the health highly elevated, one who is proud of possessing them becomes blind, and thus he loses his good sense and cannot appreciate the glories of great personalities. One should not go to anyone's house, even on the consideration of his being a relative or a friend, when the man is disturbed in his mind and looks upon the guest with raised eyebrows and angry eyes." Lord Shiva continued, "If one is hurt by the arrows of an enemy, one is not as aggrieved as when cut by the unkind words of a relative, for such grief continues to rend one's heart day and night." My dear white-complexioned wife, it is clear that on the many daughters of Daksha you are the pet, yet you will not be honored at this house because you're being my wife. Rather, you will be sorry that you are connected with me. One who is conducted by false ego and thus always distressed, both mentally and sensually, cannot tolerate the opulence of self-realized persons. Being unable to rise to the standard of self-realization, he envies such persons as much as demons envy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My dear young wife, certainly friends and relatives offer mutual greetings by standing up, welcoming one another and offering obeisances. But those who are elevated to transcendental platform, being intelligent, offer such respects to the Supersoul, who is sitting within the body, not to the person who identifies with the body. I'm always engaged in offering obeisances to Lord Vasudeva in pure Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is always pure consciousness, in which the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Vasudeva, is revealed without any covering. Therefore, you should not see your father, although he is the giver of your body, because he and his flowers are envious of me. Because of his envy, O most worshipful one, he has insulted me with cruel words, although I'm innocent. If in spite of his instruction you decide to go, neglecting my words, the future will not be good for you. You are most respectable, and when you are insulted by your relative, this insult will immediately be equal to death. Srimad Bhagavatam 4:4, Sati quits her body. The sage Maitreya said, Lord Shiva was silent after speaking to Sati, seeing her between decisions. Sati was very much anxious to see her relatives at her father's house, but at the same time she was afraid of Shiva's warning. Her mind unsettled, she moved in and out of the room in a swing as a swing moves this way and that way. Sati felt very sorry at being forbidden to go and see her relatives at her father's house, and due to affection for him, tears fell from her eyes. Shaking and very much afflicted, she looked at her uncommon husband, Lord Shiva, as if she were going to blast him with her vision. Thereafter, Sati left her husband, Lord Shiva, who had given her half this body due to affection. Breathing very heavily because of anger and bereavement, she went to the house of her husband, of her father. This less intelligent act was due to her being a weak woman. When they saw Sati living alone very rapidly, thousands of Lord Shiva's disciples, headed by Maniman and Mada, quickly followed with her with his bull Nandi in front and accompanied by the Yakshas. The disciples of Lord Shiva arranged for Sati to be seated on the back of a bull and gave her a bird which was her pet. They bore a lotus flower, a mirror, and all such paraphernalia for her enjoyment, and covered her with a great canopy. Followed by a singing party with drums, conch shells, and bugles, the entire procession was as pompous as a royal parade. Then she reached her father's house, where the sacrifice was being performed, and entered the arena where everyone was chanting the Vedic hymns. The great sages, brahmanas, and demigods were all assembled there, and there were many sacrificial animals, as well as pots made of clay, stone, gold, grass, and skin, which were all requisite for the sacrifice. When Sati with her flowers reached the arena, because all the people assembled were afraid of Daksha, none of them received her well. No one welcomed her but her mother and sisters, who with tears in their eyes and with glad faces welcomed her and talked with her very pleasingly. Although she was received by her sisters and mother, she did not reply to their words of reception, and although she was offered a seat and presents, she did not accept anything, for her father neither talked with her nor welcomed her by asking about her welfare. Present in the arena of sacrifice, Sati saw that there were no oblations for her husband, Lord Shiva. Next she realized that not only had her father failed to invite Lord Shiva, but when he saw Lord Shiva's exalted wife, Daksha did not receive her either. Thus she became greatly angry, so much so that she looked at her father as if she were going to burn him with her eyes. The followers of Lord Shiva, the ghosts, were ready to injure or kill Daksha, but Sati stopped them by her order. She was very angry and sorrowful, and in that mood she began to condemn the process of sacrificial fruitive activities and persons who were very proud of such unnecessary and troublesome sacrifices. She especially condemned her father, speaking against him in the presence of all. The blessed goddess said, Lord Shiva is the most beloved in all living entities. He has no rival. No one is very dear to him, and no one is his enemy. No one but you could be envious of such a universal being who is free from all enmity. Twice-born Daksha, a man like you can simply find fault in the qualities of others. Lord Shiva, however, not only finds no faults with others' qualities, but if sometimes someone has a good quality, he magnifies it greatly. Unfortunately, you have found fault with such a great soul. It is not wonderful for persons who have accepted the transient material body as the self to engage always in deriding great souls. Such envy on the part of materialistic persons is very good because that is the way they fall down. They are diminished by the dust of the feet of great personalities. Sati continued, My dear father, you are committing the greatest offense by envying Lord Shiva, whose very name consisting of two syllables, Shi and Va, purifies one of all sinful activities. His order is never neglected. Lord Shiva is always pure, and no one but you envies him. You are envious of Lord Shiva, who is the friend of all living entities within the three worlds. For the common man, he fulfills all desires, and because of their engagement in thinking of his lotus feet, he also blesses high personalities who are seeking after Brahmananda, transcendental bliss. Do you think that the greater, more respectable personalities than you, such as Lord Brahma, do not know this inauspicious person who goes under the name Lord Shiva? He associates with the demons in the crematorium. His locks of hair are scattered all over the body, and he is garlanded with human skulls and smeared with ashes from the crematorium. But in spite of all these inauspicious qualities, great personalities like Brahma honor him by accepting the flowers offered to his lotus feet and placing them with great respect on their heads. Sati continued, if one hears an irresponsible person blames Pharaoh, the master and controller of religion, one should block his ears and go away if unable to punish him. But if one is able to kill, then one should by force cut out the blasphemous tongue and kill the offender, and after that one should give up his own life. Therefore I shall no longer bear with unworthy body which has been received from you. You have blasphemed Lord Shiva. If someone has taken food which is poisonous, the best treatment is to vomit. It is better to execute one's own occupational duty than to criticize others. Elevated transcendentalists may sometimes forego the rules and regulations of the Vedas, since they do not need to follow them, just as the demigods travel in space, whereas ordinary men travel on the surface of the earth. In the Vedas, there are directions for two kinds of activities. For those who are attached to material enjoyment, and activities for those who are materially detached. In consideration of these two kinds of activities, there are two kinds of people who have different symptoms. If one wants to see two kinds of activities in one person, that is contradictory. But both kinds of activities may be neglected by a person who is transcendentally situated. My dear father, the opulence he possesses is impossible for either you or your flatterers to imagine. For persons who engage in fruitive activities by performing great sacrifices are concerned with satisfying their bodily necessities by eating foodstuff offered as a sacrifice. We can exhibit our opulences simply by desiring to do so. This can be achieved only by great personalities who are renounced, self-realized souls. You are an offender at the lotus feet of Lord Shiva, and unfortunately I have a body produced from yours. I'm very much ashamed of our bodily relationship, and I condemn myself because my body is contaminated by a relationship with a person who is an offender at the lotus feet of the greatest personality. Because of our family relationship, when Lord Shiva addresses me at Dakshayani, I at once become morose, and my jolliness and my smile at once disappear. I feel very much sorry that my body, which is just like a bag, has been produced by you. I shall therefore give it up. Maitreya, the sage, told Vidura, "O annihilator of enemies, while thus speaking to her father in the arena of sacrifice, Sati sat down on the ground and faced north. Dressed in saffron garments, she sanctified herself with water and closed her eyes to absorb herself in the process of mystic yoga. First of all, she sat in the required sitting posture. Then she carried the live air upwards and placed it in the position of equilibrium near the navel. Then she raised her live air, mixed with intelligence, to the heart, and then gradually towards the pulmonary passage, and from there to between her eyebrows. Thus, in order to give up her body, which had been so respectfully and affectionately seated on the lap of Lord Shiva, who is worshipped by great sages and saints, Sati, due to her anger towards her father, began to meditate on the fiery air within the body. Sati concentrated all her meditation on the holy lotus feet of her husband, Lord Shiva, who is the supreme spiritual master of all the world. Thus she became completely cleansed of all taints of sin, and her and quit her body in a blazing fire by meditation on the fiery elements. When Sati annihilated her body in anger, there was a tumultuous roar all over the universe. Why had Sati, the wife of the most respectable demigod Lord Shiva, quit her body in such a manner? It was astonishing that Daksha, who was Prajapati, the maintainer of all living entities, was so disrespectful to his own daughter Sati, who was not only chaste but was also a great soul, that she gave up her body because of his neglect. Daksha, who is so hard-hearted that he is unworthily to be a Brahmana, will gain intensive ill fame because of his offenses to his daughter, because of not having prevented her death, and because of his great envy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. While people were talking among themselves about the wonderful voluntary death of Sati, the attendants who had come with her readied themselves to kill Daksha with their weapons. They came towards forcibly, but Bhrigu saw the danger and, offering oblations into the southern side of the sacrificial fire, immediately uttered mantric hymns from the Yajur Veda, by which the destroyers of yajnik performances could be killed immediately. When Bhrigu offered oblations in the fire, immediately many thousands of demigods named Ribhus became manifested. All of them were powerful, having achieved strength from Soma, the moon. When the Ribhu demigods attacked the ghosts, and Guhukyas with half-burnt fuel from the Yajna fire, all these attendants of Sati fled in different directions and disappeared. This was possible simply because of Brahma Tejas, Brahmanical power. Srimad Bhagavatam 4:5. Instruction of the sacrifice of Daksha. Maitreya said, when Lord Shiva heard from Narada that Sati, his wife, was now dead because of Prajapati Daksha's insult to her, and that his soldiers had been given away by the Ribhu demigods, he became greatly angry. Thus Lord Shiva, being extremely angry, pressed his lips with his teeth and immediately snatched from his head a strand of hair which blazed like electricity or fire. He stood up at once, laughing like a madman, and dashed the hair into the ground. A fearful black demon, as high as the sky and as bright as 3 suns combined, was thereby created. His teeth were fearful, and the hairs on his hand like burning fire. He had thousands of arms, equipped with various weapons, and he was garlanded with the heads of men. When that gigantic demon asked, with folded hands, "What shall I do, my lord?" Lord Shiva, who is known as Bhutananda Nantha, directly ordered, "Because you are born from my body, you are the chief of all my associates. Therefore, kill Daksha and his soldiers at the sacrifice." Maitreya continued, "My dear Vidura, that black person was the personified anger of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he was prepared to execute the orders of Lord Shiva. Thus, considering himself capable of coping with any power offered against him, he circumambulated Lord Shiva. Many other soldiers of Lord Shiva followed the fierce personality in a tumultuous uproar. He carried a great trident, fearful enough to kill even death, and on his legs he wore bangles which seemed to roar. At that time, all the persons assembled in the sacrificial arena, the priests, the chiefs of the sacrificial performance, and the brahmanas and their wives wondered where the darkness was coming from. Later they could understand that it was a dust storm, and all of them were full of anxiety. Conjecturing on the origin of the storm, they said, "There is no wind blowing, and no cows are passing, nor is it possible that this dust storm could be raised by plunderers, for there is still the strong king Bari who would punish them. Where is this storm blowing from? In the dissolution of the planet now to Is the dissolution of the planet now to occur? Prasuti, the wife of Daksha, along with the other women assembled, because they became very anxious and said, "This danger has been created by Daksha because of the death of Sati, who even though completely innocent, quit her body as her sisters locked on." At the time of dissolution, Lord Shiva's hair is scattered, and he pierced the rules of the different directions with the trident. He laughed and danced proudly, scattered their hands like flags, as thunder scattered the clouds all over the world. The gigantic black man bared his fearful teeth. By the movements of his brows, he scattered the luminaries all over the sky, and he covered them with his strong, piercing effulgence. Because of the misbehavior of Daksha, even Lord Brahma, Daksha's father, could not have been saved from the great exhibition of anger. While all the people talked among themselves, Daksha saw dangerous omens from all sides, from the earth and from the sky. My dear Vidura, all the followers of Lord Shiva surrounded the arena of sacrifice. They were of short stature and were equipped with various kinds of weapons. Their bodies appeared to be like those of sharks, blackish and yellowish. They ran all around the sacrificial arena and thus began to create disturbances. Some of the soldiers pulled down the pillars which were supporting the pandal of sacrifice. Some of them entered the female quarters. Some began destroying the sacrificial arena, and some entered the kitchen in the residential quarters. They broke all the pots made for use in the sacrifice, and some of them began to extinguish the sacrificial fire. Some tore down the boundary line of the sacrificial arena, and some passed urine on the arena. Some blocked the way of the fleeing sages. Some threatened the women assembled there, and some arrested the demigods who were fleeing the pandal. Maniman, one of the followers of Lord Shiva, arrested Bhrigumuni, and Virabhadra, the black demon, arrested Prajapati Daksha. Another follower, who was named Chandesha, arrested Pusha. Nandishvara arrested the demigod Bhaga. There was a continuous shower of stones, and all the priests and other members assembled at the sacrifice were put into immense misery. For fear of their lives, they dispersed in different directions. Virabhadra tore off the moustache of Bhrigu, who was offering the sacrificial oblations with his hands in the fire. Virabhadra immediately caught Bhaga, who had been moving his eyebrows during Bhrigu's cursing of Lord Shiva, and out of great anger thrust him to the ground and forcibly put out his eyes. Just as Baladeva knocked out the teeth of Dantavakra, the king of Kalinga, during the gambling match at the marriage ceremony of Aniruddha, Virabhadra knocked out the teeth of both Daksha, who had shown them while cursing Lord Shiva, and Pusha, who, by smiling sympathetically, had also shown his teeth. Then Virabhadra, the giant-like personality, sat on the chest of Daksha and tried to separate his head from his body with sharp weapons, but was unsuccessful. He tried to cut the head of Daksha with hymns as well as weapons, but still it was hard to cut even the surface of the skin of Daksha's head. Thus Virabhadra was exceedingly bewildered. Then Virabhadra saw the wooden device in the sacrificial arena, by which the animals have been killed, he took the opportunity of this facility to behead Daksha. Upon seeing the action of Virabhadra, the party of Lord Shiva was pleased and cried out joyfully, and all the bhutas, ghosts, and demons had to come, made a tumultuous sound. On the other hand, the Brahmanas in charge of the sacrifice cried out in grief at the death of Daksha. Virabhadra then took the head and with great anger threw it into the southern side of the sacrificial fire, offering it an oblation. In this way, the followers of Lord Shiva devastated all the arrangements of the sacrifice. After setting fire to the whole arena, they departed for their master's abode, Kailash. Srimad Bhagavatam 4:6. Brahma satisfies Lord Shiva. Brahma satisfies Lord Shiva. All the priests and other members of the sacrificial assembly and all the demigods, having been defeated by the soldiers of Lord Shiva and injured by the weapons like tridents and swords, approached Lord Brahma with great fear. After offering him obeisances, they began to speak in detail of all the events which had taken place. Both Lord Brahma and Vishnu had already known that such events would occur in sacrificial arena of Daksha, and knowing beforehand, they did not go to the sacrifice. When Lord Brahma heard everything from the demigods and the members who had attended the sacrifice, he replied, "You cannot be happy in executing a sacrifice if you blaspheme a great personality and thereby offend his lotus feet. You cannot have happiness in that way. You have excluded Lord Shiva from taking part in the sacrificial results, and therefore you are all offenders of his lotus feet. Still, if you go without mental reservations and surrender unto him and fall down at his lotus feet, he will be very pleased." Lord Brahma also advised them that Lord Shiva is so powerful that by his anger all the planets and their chief controllers can be destroyed immediately. Also, he said that Lord Shiva was especially sorry because he had recently lost his dear wife and was also very much afflicted by the unkind words of Daksha. Under the circumstances, Lord Brahma suggested it would behoove them to go at once and beg his pardon. Lord Brahma said that no one, not even himself, Indra, all the members assembled in the sacrificial arena, or all the sages who could know how powerful Lord Shiva is, under the circumstances, who would dare to commit an offense at his lotus feet. After this, instructing all the demigods, the Pitas, and the lords of the living entities, Lord Brahma took them with him and left for the abode of Lord Shiva, known as the Kailasha hill. Their abode, known as Kailasa, is full of different herbs and vegetables, and it is sanctified by Vedic hymns and mystic yoga practice. Thus, the residents of that abode are demigods by birth and have all mystic powers. Besides them, there are other human beings who are known as Kinnaras and Gandharvas and are accompanied by beautiful wives who are known as Apsaras or angels. Kailasa is full of mountains filled with all kinds of valuable jewels and minerals and surrounded by all varieties of valuable trees and plants. The top of the hill is nicely decorated by various types of deer. There are many waterfalls, and in the mountains there are many beautiful caves in which the very beautiful wives of the mystic are found. On Kailasa hill, there is always the rhythmical sound of peacocks, sweet vibrations, and bees humming. Cuckoos are always singing, and other birds whisper among themselves. There are tall trees with straight branches that appear to call the sweet birds, and when herds of elephants pass through the hill, it appears that the Kailasa hill moves with them. When the waterfalls resound, it appears that Kailasa hill does also. The whole of Kailasa hill is decorated with various kinds of trees, of which the following names may be mentioned: Mandara, Parijata, Sarala, Tamala, Tala, Kovidara, Asana, Arjuna, Amrajati, Mango, Kadamba, Dhuli Kadamba, Naga, Punaga, Champaka, Patala, Ashoka, Bakula, Kunda, and Kurabaka. The entire hill is decorated with such trees, which produce flowers with fragrant aromas. There are other trees also which decorate the hill, such as the golden lotus flower, the cinnamon tree, malati, kubja, and madhavi. Kailasa hill is also decorated with such trees as kata, jackfruit, julara, banyan trees, lakshas, nigrodhas, and trees producing asafoetida. Also, there are trees of betel nuts and burjabhatra, as well as rajabuga, blackberries, and similar other trees. There are mango trees, priyala, madhuka, and inguda. Besides these, there are other trees like thin bamboos, kichaka, and varieties of other bamboo trees, all decorating the tracts of Kailasa hill. There are different kinds of lotus flowers such as kumuda, utpala, and satapatra. The forest appears to be a decorated garden, and the small lakes are full of various kinds of birds who whisper very sweetly. There are many kinds of other animals though, like deer, monkeys, boars, lions, rickshaws, salikas, forest cows, forest asses, tigers, small deer, buffalo, and many other animals who are fully enjoying their lives. There are varieties of deer, such as Karnatra, Ekapada, Ashvasya, Vrika, and Kasturi, the deer which bears musk. Besides the deer, there are many banana trees which decorate the small hillside lakes very nicely. There is a small lake named Alakananda, in which Sati used to take her bath, and that lake is especially auspicious. All the demigods, after seeing the specific beauty of Kailasa hill, were struck by wonder at the great opulence to be found there. Thus the demigods saw the wonderfully beautiful region known as Alaka in the forest known as Saugandhika, which means full of fragrance. The forest is known as Saugandhika became of an abundance of lotus flowers. They also saw the two rivers named Nanda and Alakananda. Those two rivers are sanctified by the dust of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda. My dear Kshatta, Vidura, the celestial damsels come down to those rivers in their airplanes with their husbands, and after sexual enjoyment, they enter the water and enjoy sprinkling their husbands with water. After damsels of the heavenly planets bathe in the water, it becomes yellowish and fragrant due to the kunkuma from their bodies. Thus the elephants come to bathe there with their wives, the she-elephants, and they also drink the water, although they are not thirsty. The airplanes of the heavenly denizens are bedecked with pearls, gold, and many valuable jewels. The heavenly denizens are compared to clouds in the sky decorated with occasional flashes of electric lighting. While traveling, the demigods passed over the forest known as Saugandhika, which is full of varieties of flowers, fruit, and desire trees. While passing over the forest, they also saw the regions of Yakshasvara. In that celestial forest, there were many birds whose necks were colored reddish and whose sweet sounds mixed with the humming of the bees. The lakes were abundantly decorated with crying swans, as well as strong-stemmed lotus flowers. All these atmospheric influences unsettled the forest elephants, who flocked together in the sandalwood forest, and the blowing wind agitated the minds of the damsels there for further sexual enjoyment. They also saw that the bathing ghatas and their staircases were made of Vaidura mani. The water was full of lotus flowers. Passing by such lakes, the demigods reached a place where there was a great banyan tree. That banyan tree was 800 miles high. And its branches spread over 600 miles around. The tree cast a fine shade which permanently cooled the temperature, yet there was no noise of birds. The demigods saw Lord Shiva sitting under that tree, which was competent to give perfection to mystic yogis and deliver all people. As grave as time eternal, he appeared to have given up all anger. Lord Shiva sat there, surrounded by saintly persons like Kuvera, the master of the Guhukyas, and the 4 Kumaras, who were already liberated souls. Lord Shiva was grave and saintly. The demigods saw Lord Shiva, situated in his perfection, as the master of the senses, knowledge, fruitive activities, and the path of achieving perfection. He was the friend of the entire world, and by virtue of his full affection for everyone, he was very auspicious. He was seated in a deerskin and was practicing all forms of austerity. Because his body was smeared with ashes, he looked like an evening cloud. On his hair was the sign of a half moon, a symbolic representation. He was seated on a straw mattress and speaking to all present, including the great sage Narada, to whom he specifically spoke about the absolute truth. His left leg was placed on his right thigh, and his left hand was placed on his left thigh. The sitting posture is called Virasana. In his right hand he held Rudraksha beads, and his finger was in the mode of argument. All the sages and demigods, headed by Indra, offered their respectful obeisances unto Lord Shiva with folded hands. Lord Shiva was dressed in saffron garments and absorbed in trance, thus appearing to be the foremost of all sages. Lord Shiva's lotus feet were worshipped by both the demigods and demons, but still, in spite of his exalted position, as soon as he saw that Lord Brahma was there among all the other demigods, he immediately stood up and offered him respect by bowing down and touching his lotus feet, just as Vamanadeva offered his respectful obeisances to Kashyapa Muni. All the sages who were sitting with Lord Shiva, such as Narada and others, also offered their respectful obeisances to Lord Brahma. After being so worshipped, Lord Brahma, smiling, began to speak to Lord Shiva. Lord Brahma said, "My dear Lord Shiva, I know that you are the controller of the entire material manifestation, the combination father and mother of the cosmic manifestation, and the supreme Brahman beyond the cosmic manifestation as well. I know you in that way. My dear Lord, you create this cosmic manifestation, maintain it, and annihilate it by expansion of your personality, exactly as a spider creates, maintains, and winds up its web. My dear Lord, your Lordship has introduced the system of sacrifices throughout the agency of Daksha, and thus one may derive the benefits of religious activities and economic development. Under your regulative principles, the institution of the 4 Varanas and Ashramas is respected. The Brahmanas therefore vow to follow this system strictly. O most auspicious Lord, you have ordained the heavenly planets, the spiritual Vaikuntha planets, and the impersonal Brahman sphere as the representative destinations of the performers of auspicious activities. Similarly, for others who are miscreants, you have destined different kinds of hells which are horrible and ghastly. Yet sometimes it is found that their destinations are just the opposite. It is very difficult to ascertain the cause of this. My dear Lord, devotees who have been fully dedicated to their lives into your lotus feet suddenly observe your presence as Paramatma in each and every being, and as such, they do not differentiate between one living being and another. Such persons treat all living entities equally. They never become overwhelmed by anger like animals, who can see nothing without differentiation. Persons who observe everything with differentiation, who are simply attached to fruitive activities, who are mean-minded, who are always pained to see the flourishing conditions of others, and who thus gives distress to them by uttering harsh and piercing words, have already been killed by Providence. Thus, there is no need for them to be killed again by an exalted personality like you. My dear Lord, if in some places materialists, who are already bewildered by the insurmountable, insurmountable, insurmountable illusory energy of the Supreme Godhead, sometimes commit offenses, a saintly person with compassion does not take this seriously. Knowing that they commit offenses because they are overpowered by the illusory energy, he does not show his powers to counteract them. My dear Lord, you are never bewildered by the formidable influence of the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, you are omniscient and should be merciful and compassionate towards those who are bewildered by the same illusory energy and are very much attached to fruitive activities. My dear Lord Shiva, you are a shareholder of a portion of the sacrifice, and you are the giver of the result. The bad priest did not deliver your share, and therefore you destroyed everything, and the sacrifice remains unfinished. Now you can do the needful and take your rightful share. My dear Lord, by your mercy, the performer of the sacrifice, King Daksha, may get back his life. Bhaga may get back his eyes. Brigu, his moustache, and Pusha, his teeth. O Lord Shiva, may the demigods and the priests whose limbs have been broken by your soldiers recover from the injuries by your grace. O destroyer of the sacrifice, please take your portion of the sacrifice and let the sacrifice be completed by your grace. Srimad Bhagavatam 4:7. The sacrifice performed by Daksha. The sage Maitreya said, O mighty armed Vidura, Lord Shiva being thus pacified by the words of Lord Brahma, spoke as follows in answer to Lord Brahma's request. Lord Shiva said, My dear Father Brahma, I do not mind the offenses created by the demigods. Because these demigods are childish and less intelligent, I do not take a serious view of their offenses. I have punished them only in order to right them. Lord Shiva continued, Since the head of Daksha has already been burned to ashes, he will have the head of the goat. The demigods known as Bhaga will be able to see his share of sacrifice through the eyes of Mitra. The demigod Pusha will be able to chew only through the teeth of his disciples, and if alone, he will have to satisfy himself by eating dough made from chickpea flour. But the demigods who have agreed to give me my share of the sacrifice will recover from all their injuries. Those who have had their arms cut off will have to work with their arms of Ashwini Kumara, and those whose hands were cut off will have to work with their hands of Pusha. The priests will also have to act in that manner. As for Brigu, he will have the beard from a goat's head. The great sage Maitreya said, My dear Vidura, all the personalities present were very much satisfied in heart and soul upon hearing the words of Lord Shiva, who is the best among the Benedictors. Thereafter, Brigu, the chief of the great sages, invited Lord Shiva to come to the sacrificial arena. Thus the demigods, accompanied by the sages, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, all went to the place where the great sacrifice was being performed. After everything was executed exactly as directed by Lord Shiva, Daksha's body was joined to the head of the animal meant to be killed for the sacrifice. When the animal's head was fixed on the body of King Daksha, Daksha was immediately brought to consciousness, and he was awakened from sleep. The king saw Lord Shiva standing before him. At that time, when Daksha saw Lord Shiva, who rides upon a bull, his heart, which was polluted by envy of Lord Shiva, was immediately cleansed, just as the water in the lake is cleansed by autumn rains. King Daksha wanted to offer praise to Lord Shiva, but as he remembered the ill-fated death of his daughter Sati, his eyes filled with tears, and in bereavement his voice choked up and he could not say anything. At this time, King Daksha, afflicted by love and affection, was very much awakened to his real senses. With great endeavor, he pacified his mind, checked his feelings, and with pure consciousness began to offer prayers to Lord Shiva. King Daksha said, "My dear Lord Shiva, I committed a great offense against you, but you are so kind that instead of withdrawing your mercy, you have done me a great favor by punishing me. You and Lord Vishnu never neglect even useless, unqualified brahmanas. Why then should you neglect me, who am engaged in performing sacrifices? My dear great and powerful Lord Shiva, you were created first from the mouth of Lord Brahma in order to protect the brahmanas in pursuing education, austerities, vows, and self-realization. As protector of the brahmanas, you always protect the regulative principles they follow, just as a cowherd boy keeps a stick in his hand to give protection to the cows. I did not know your full glories. For this reason, I threw arrows of sharp words at you in the open assembly, although you did not take them into account. I was going down to hell because of my disobedience to you, who are the most respectable personality, but you took compassion upon me and saved me by avoiding punishment. I request that you be pleased by your own mercy, since I cannot satisfy you by my words." The great sage Maitreya said, "Thus being pardoned by Lord Shiva, King Daksha, with the permission of Lord Brahma, again began the performance of the yagya, along with the great learned sages, the priests, and others. Thereafter, in order to resume the activities of sacrifice, the Brahmanas first arranged to purify the sacrificial arena of the contamination caused by the touch of Virabhadra, and the other ghostly followers of Lord Shiva. Then they arranged to offer into the fire the oblations known as Purodasha. The great sage Maitreya said to Vidura, "My dear Vidura, as soon as King Daksha offered the clarified butter with Yajurveda mantras and sanctified meditation, Lord Vishnu appeared there in his original form as Narayana. Lord Narayana was seated on the shoulder of Stotra or Garuda, who had big wings. As soon as the Lord appeared, all directions were illuminated, diminishing the luster of Brahma and the others present. His complexion was blackish, his garment yellow like gold, and his helmet was dazzling as the sun. His hair was bluish, the color of black bees, and his face was decorated with earrings. His 8 hands held a conch shell, wheel, club, lotus flower, arrow, bow, shield, and sword, and they were decorated with golden ornaments such as bangles and bracelets. His whole body resembled a blossoming tree beautifully decorated with various kinds of flowers. Lord Vishnu looked extraordinarily beautiful because the goddess of fortune and the garland were situated on his chest. His face was beautifully decorated with a smiling attitude which can captivate the entire world, especially the devotees. Fans of white hair appeared on both sides of the Lord like white swans, and the white canopy overhead looked like the moon. As soon as Lord Vishnu was visible, all the demigods, Brahma and Lord Shiva, the Gandharvas, and all present there immediately offered their respectful obeisances by falling down straight before him, in the presence of the glaring effulgence of the bodily luster of Narayana. Everyone else's luster faded away, and everyone stopped speaking. Fearful with awe and veneration, all present touched their hands to their heads and prepared to offer their prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Adhokshaja. Although the mental scope of even demigods like Brahma was unable to comprehend the unlimited glories of the Supreme Lord, they were all able to perceive the transcendental form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by His grace. Only by such grace could they offer their respectful prayers according to their different capacities. When Lord Vishnu accepted the oblations offered in the sacrifice, Daksha and Prajapati began with great pleasure to offer respectful prayers unto him. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually the master of all sacrifices and protector of all the Prajapatis, and he is served even by such personalities as Nanda and Sunanda. Daksha addressed the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My dear Lord, you are transcendental to all speculative positions. You are completely spiritual, devoid of all fear, and you are always in control of the material energy. Even though you appear in the material energy, you are situated transcendentally. You are always free from material contamination because you are completely self-sufficient. The priest addressed the Lord, saying, O Lord, transcendental to material contamination, by the curse offered by Lord Shiva's men, we have become attached to fruitive activities, and thus we are now fallen, and therefore do not know anything about you. On the contrary, we are now involved in the injunction of the three departments of the Vedic knowledge under the plea of executing rituals in the name of yajna. We know that you have made arrangements for distributing the respective shares of the demigods. The members of the assembly addressed the Lord. O exclusive shelter for all who are situated in troubled life. In this formidable fort of conditional existence, the time element, like a snake, is always looking for an opportunity to strike. This world is full of ditches of so-called distress and happiness, and there are many ferocious animals always ready to attack. The fire of lamentation is always blazing, and the mirage of false happiness is always alluring, but one has no shelter from them. Thus, foolish persons live in the cycle of birth and death, always overburdened in discharging their so-called duties, and we do not know when they will accept the shelter of your lotus feet. Lord Shiva said, My dear Lord, my mind and consciousness are always fixed on your lotus feet, which are the source of all the benediction and the fulfillment of all desires, and worshipped by all liberated great sages, because your lotus feet are worthy of worship. With my mind fixed on your lotus feet, I am no longer disturbed by persons who blaspheme me, claiming that my activities are not purified. I do not mind their accusations, and I excuse them out of compassion, just as you exhibit compassion towards all living entities. Sri Bhrigu said, My dear Lord, all living entities, beginning from the highest, namely Lord Brahma, down to the ordinary ant, are under the influence of the unsurmountable spell of illusory energy, and thus they are ignorant of their constitutional position. Everyone believes in the concept of the body, and all are thus submerged in the darkness of illusion. They are actually unable to understand how you live in every living entity as the supersoul, nor can they understand your absolute position. but you are the eternal friend and protector of all surrendered souls. Therefore, please be kind towards us, and please forgive all our offenses. Lord Brahma said, My dear Lord, your personality and eternal form cannot be understood by any person who is trying to know you through the different process of acquiring knowledge. Your position is always transcendental to the material creation, whereas the empiric attempt to understand you is material, as are its objectives and instruments. King Indra said, My dear Lord, your transcendental form with 8 hands and weapons in each of them appears for the welfare of the entire universe, and it is very pleasing to the mind and eyes. In such a form, your lordship is always prepared to punish the demons who are envious of your devotees. The wives of the performance of the sacrifice said, My dear Lord, this sacrifice was arranged for under the instruction of Brahma, but unfortunately Lord Shiva, being angry at Daksha, devastated the entire scene, and because of his anger, the animals meant for sacrifice are lying dead. Therefore the preparations of the yajna have been lost. Now by the glance of your lotus eyes, the sanctity of this sacrificial arena may be again invoked. The sages prayed, Dear Lord, your activities are most wonderful, and although you do everything by your different potencies, you are not at all attached to such activities. You are not even attached to the goddess of fortune, who is worshipped by the great demigods like Brahma, who pray to achieve her mercy. The Siddharths prayed, Like an elephant that has suffered in a forest fire but can forget all its troubles by entering a river, our minds, O Lord, always merge in the nectarian river of your transcendental pastimes, and they desire never to leave such transcendental bliss, which is as good as the pleasure of merging in the Absolute. The wife of Daksha prayed as follows, My dear Lord, it is very fortunate that you have appeared in this arena of sacrifice. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, and I request that you be pleased on this occasion. The sacrificial arena is not beautiful without you, just as a body is not beautiful without the head. The governors of various planets spoke as follows, Dear Lord, we believe only in our direct perception, and therefore we see you as a creation of the material world. But under these circumstances, we do not know whether we have actually seen you with our material senses. By our material senses, we can simply perceive the cosmic manifestation, but you are beyond the 5 elements. You are the 6th. The great mystic said, Dear Lord, persons who see you as not different from themselves, knowing that you are the super soul of all living entities, are certainly very, very dear to you. You are very favorable towards those who engage in devotional service, accepting you as the Lord, and themselves as the servants. By your mercy, you are always inclined in their favor. We offer our respectful obeisances unto the Supreme, who has created varieties of manifestations and put them under the spell of the 3 qualities of the material world in order to create, maintain, and annihilate them. He himself is not under the control of the external energy, and in his personal feature, he is completely devoid of the variegated manifestation of material qualities, and he is under no illusion of false identification. The personified Vedas said, We offer our respectful obeisances unto you, the Lord, the shelter of the quality of goodness, and therefore the source of all religion, austerity, and penance. For you are transcendental to all material qualities, and no one knows you or your actual situation. The fire god said, My dear Lord, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, because by your favor I am as luminous and blazing fire, and I accept the offerings mixed with butter and offered in sacrifice. The 5 kinds of offerings according to the Yajurveda are all your different energies, and you are worshipped by 5 kinds of Vedic hymns. Sacrifice means you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The demigod said, Dear Lord, formerly, when there was a devastation, you conserved all the different energies of material manifestation. At that time, all the inhabitants of the higher planets, represented by such liberated souls as Sanaka, were meditating on you by philosophical speculation. You are, therefore, the original person, and you rest in the water of devastation of the bed of the Shesha snake. Now, today, you are visible to us, who are all your servants. Please give us protection. The Gandharvas said, Dear Lord, all the demigods, including Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, and Lindra, along with Mairichi, and the other great sages, are all only differentiated parts and parcels of your body. You are the Supreme Almighty Great. The whole creation is just like a play for you. We always accept you as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we offer our respectful obeisances unto you. The Vidyadharas said, Dear Lord, this human form of body is meant for attaining the highest perfectional objective, but impelled by your external energy, the living entity identifies himself with his body and with the material energy, and therefore, influenced by Maya, he wants to become happy by material enjoyment. He is misled and always attracted by temporary, illusory happiness. But your transcendental activities are so powerful that if one engages in hearing and chanting such topics, he can be delivered from illusion. The Brahmanas said, Dear Lord, you are sacrifice personified. You are the offering of clarified butter. You are the fire. You are the chanting of Vedic hymns by which the sacrifice is conducted. You are the fuel. You are the flame. You are the kusha grass. You are the sacrificial pots. You are the priests who perform the yajna. You are the demigods headed by Indra. You are the sacrificial animal. Everything that is sacrificed is you or your energy. Dear Lord, O personified Vedic knowledge, in the past millennium, long, long ago, when you appeared as the great boar incarnation, you picked up the world from the water, as an elephant picks up a lotus flower from a lake. When you vibrated transcendental sound in that gigantic form of a boar, the sound was accepted as a sacrificial hymn, and great sages like Sanaka meditated upon it and offered prayers for your glorification. Dear Lord, we were awaiting your audience because we have been unable to perform the yajnas according to the Vedic rituals. We pray unto you, therefore, to be pleased with us. Simply by chanting your holy name, one can surpass all obstacles. We offer our respectful obeisances unto you in your presence. Sri Maitreya said, After Lord Vishnu was glorified by all present, Daksha, his consciousness purified, arranged to begin again the yajna which has been devastated by the followers of Lord Shiva. Maitreya continued, My dear sinless Vidura, Lord Vishnu is actually the enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices, yet, because of his being the super soul of all living entities, he was satisfied simply with his share of the sacrificial offerings. He therefore addressed Daksha in a pleasing attitude. Lord Vishnu replied, Brahma, Lord Shiva and I are the supreme cause of the material manifestation. I am the super soul, the self-sufficient witness, but impersonally. There is no difference between Brahma, Lord Shiva and me. The Lord continued, My dear Daksha Jiva, my dear Daksha Dvija, I am the original personality of Godhead, but in order to create, maintain, and annihilate this cosmic manifestation, I act through my material energy, and according to the different grades of activity, my representations are differently named. The Lord continued. One who is not in proper knowledge thinks that demigods like Brahma and Shiva are independent, or he even thinks that the living entities are independent. A person with average intelligence does not think the head and other parts of the body to be separate. Similarly, my devotees do not differentiate Vishnu, the all-prevailing personality of Godhead, from any things or living entity. Lord Vishnu continued. One who does not consider Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, or the living entities in general to be separate from the Supreme, and who knows Brahman, actually realizes peace. Others do not. The sage Maitreya said, thus Daksha, the head of all Prajapatis, having been nicely instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, worshipped Lord Vishnu. After worshipping him by performing the prescribed sacrificial ceremonies, Daksha separately worshipped Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. With all respect, Daksha worshipped Lord Shiva with his share of the remnants of the yajna. After finishing the ritualistic sacrificial activities, he satisfied all the other demigods and the other people assembled there. Then, after finishing all these duties with the priest, he took a bath and was fully satisfied. Thus, worshipping the Supreme Lord Vishnu by the ritualistic performance of the sacrifice, Daksha was completely situated on the religious path. Moreover, all the demigods who had assembled at the sacrifice blessed him that he might increase his piety, and then they left. Maitreya said, I have heard that after giving up the body, she had received from Daksha. Dakshayani, his daughter, took her birth in the kingdom of the Himalayas. She was born as the daughter of Meena. I heard this from authoritative sources. Ambika, goddess Durga, who was known as Dakshyani Sati, again accepted Lord Shiva as her husband, just as different energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead act during the course of a new creation. Maitreya said, My dear Vidura, I heard the story of Daksha Yagna, which was devastated by Lord Shiva from Uddhava, a great devotee and a disciple of Brihaspati. The great sage Maitreya concluded, if one hears and again narrates with faith and devotion this story of Daksha Yajna, as it was conducted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, then certainly one is cleared of all contamination of material existence, O son of Kuru. Srimad Bhagavatam 4.8. Dhruva Maharaja leaves home for the forest. The great sage Maitreya said, the four great Kumara sages, headed by Sanaka, as well as Narada, Ribhu, Hamsa, Aruni, and Yati, all sons of Brahma, did not live at home, but became Urdhvareta, or Naishtika Brahmacharis, unadulterated celibates. Another son of Lord Brahma was Irreligion, whose wife's name was Falsity. From their combination were born two demons named Dambha, or bluffing, and Maya, or cheating. These two demons were taken by a demon named Nirti, who had no children. Maitreya told Vidura, O great soul, from Dambha and Maya were born greed and Nikriti, the cunning. From their combination came children named Krodha, anger, and Himsa, envy. And from their combination were born Kali and his sister Drukti, harsh speech. O greatest of all men, by the combination of Kali and harsh speech, were born children named Mrityu, death, and Bhiti, fear. From the combination of Mrityu and Bhiti came children named Yatana, excessive pain, and Niraya, hell. My dear Vidura, I have summarily explained the causes of devastation. One who hears this description 3 times attains piety and washes the sinful contamination from his soul. Maitreya continued, O best of the Kuru dynasty, I shall now describe to you the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu, who was born of a part of a plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Swayambhuva Manu had 2 sons by his wife Satarupa, and the names of the sons were Uttanapada and Priyavrata. Because both of them were descendants of a plenary expansion of Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they were very competent to rule the universe, to maintain and protect the citizens. King Uttanapada had 2 queens named Suniti and Suruchi. Suruchi was much more dear to the king. Suniti, who had a son named Dhruva, was not his favorite. Once upon a time, King Uttanapada was patting the son of Suruchi, Uttama, placing him on his lap. Dhruva Maharaja was also trying to get on the king's lap, but the king did not very much welcome him. While the child, Dhruva Maharaja, was trying to get on the lap of his father, Suruchi, his stepmother, became very envious of the child. And with great pride she began to speak so as to be heard by the king himself. Queen Suruchi told Dhruva Maharaja, My dear child, you do not deserve to sit on the throne or on the lap of the king. Surely you are also the son of the king, but because you did not take your birth from my womb, you are not qualified to sit on your father's lap. My dear child, you are unaware that you were born not from my womb, but of another woman. Therefore, you should know that your attempt is doomed to failure. You are trying to fulfill a desire which is impossible to fulfill. If you at all desire to rise to the throne of the king, then you have to undergo severe austerities. First of all, you must satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, and then, when you are favored by him because of such worship, you shall have to take your next birth from my womb. The sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, as a snake, when struck by a stick, breathes in very heavily, Dhruva Maharaja, having been struck by these strong words of his stepmother, began to breathe very heavily because of great anger. When he saw that his father was silent and did not protect, he immediately left the place and went to his mother. When Dhruva Maharaja reached his mother, his lips were trembling in anger, and he was crying very grievously. Queen Suniti immediately lifted her son onto her lap, while palace residents who had heard all the harsh words of Suruchi related everything in detail. Thus Suniti also became greatly aggrieved. This incident was unbearable for Suniti's patience. She began to burn, as if in a forest fire, and in her grief, and she became just like a burnt leaf and so lamented. And she remembered the words of her co-wife, her bright lotus-like face filled with tears, and thus she spoke. She also was breathing very heavily, and she did not know the factual remedy for the painful situation. Not finding any remedy, she said to her son, My dear son, I don't wish for anything inauspicious for others. Anyone who inflicts pain upon others suffers himself from that pain. Soon it is said, My dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Suruchi is so, because the king your father does not consider me his wife or even his maiden servant. He feels ashamed to accept me. Therefore, it is a fact that you have taken birth from the womb of an unfortunate woman, and by being fed from her breast, you have grown up. My dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Suruchi, your stepmother, although very harsh to hear, is factual. Therefore, If you desire at all to sit on the same throne as your step-brother Uttama, then give up your envious attitude and immediately try to execute the instructions of your stepmother. Without further delay, you must engage yourself in worshipping the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Suniti continued, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is so great that simply by worshipping his lotus feet, your great-grandfather, Lord Brahma, acquired the necessary qualifications to create this universe. Although he is unborn and is the chief of all living entities, he is situated in that exalted post because of the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whom even great yogis worship by controlling the mind and regulating the life air, prana. Suniti informed her son, your grandfather, Swayambhuvamanu, executed great sacrifices with distribution of charity, and thereby, with unflinching faith and devotion, he worshipped and satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By acting in that way, he achieved the greatest success in material happiness and thereafter achieved liberation, which is impossible to obtain by worshipping the demigods. My dear boy, you also should take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is very kind to his devotees. Persons seeking liberation from the cycle of birth and death always take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord in devotional service. Becoming purified by executing your allotted occupation, just situate the Supreme Personality of Godhead in your heart, and without deviating for a moment, engage always in his service. My dear Dhruva, as far as I am concerned, I do not find anyone who can mitigate your distress by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those eyes are like lotus petals. Many demigods, such as Lord Brahma, seek the pleasure of the goddess of fortune. But the goddess of fortune herself, with a lotus flower in her hand, is always ready to render service to the Supreme Lord. The great sage Maitreya continued, the instruction of Dhruva Maharaja's mother, Suniti, was actually meant for fulfilling his desired objective. Therefore, after deliberate consideration and with intelligence and fixed determination, he left his father's house. The great sage Narada overheard this news and, understanding all the activities of Dhruva Maharaj, he was struck with wonder. He approached Dhruva and, touching the boy's head with his all-virtuous hand, he spoke as follows. How wonderful are the powerful Kshatriyas! They cannot tolerate even a slight infringement upon their prestige. Just imagine, this boy is only a small child, yet harsh words from his stepmother proved unbearable to him. The great sage Narada told Dhruva, my dear boy, you are only a little boy whose attachment is to sport and other frivolities. Why are you so affected by words insulting your honor? My dear Dhruva, if you feel that your sense of honor has been insulted, you still have no cause for dissatisfaction. This kind of dissatisfaction is another feature of the illusory energy. Every living entity is controlled by his previous actions, and therefore there are different varieties of life for enjoying or suffering. The process of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very wonderful. One who is intelligent should accept that process and be satisfied with whatever comes, favorable or unfavorable, by his supreme will. Now we have decided to undertake the mystic process of meditation under the instruction of your mother, just to achieve the mercy of the Lord. But in my opinion, such austerities are not possible for an ordinary man. It is very difficult to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Narada Muni continued. After trying this process for many, many births and remaining unattached to material contamination, placing themselves continuously in trance and executing many types of austerities, Many mystic yogis were unable to find the end of the path of God realization. For this reason, my dear boy, you should not endeavor for this. It will not be successful. It is better that you go home. When you are grown up, by the mercy of the Lord, you will get a chance for these mystic performances. At this time, you may execute this function. One should try to keep himself satisfied in any condition of life, whether distress or happiness, which is offered by the Supreme Will. A person who endures in this way is able to cross over the darkness of nescience very easily. Every man should act like this. When he meets a person more qualified than himself, he should be very pleased. When he meets someone less qualified than himself, he should be compassionate toward him. And when he meets someone equal to himself, he should make friendship with him. In this way, one is never affected by the threefold miseries of this material world. Dhruva Maharaja said, My dear Lord, Naradaji, for a person whose heart is disturbed by the material conditions of happiness and distress, whatever you have so kindly explained for attainment of peace of mind is certainly a very good instruction. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm covered by ignorance, and this kind of philosophy does not touch my heart. My dear Lord, I'm very impudent for not accepting your instructions, but this is not my fault. It is due to my having been born in Kshatriya family. My stepmother, Suruchi, has pierced my heart with your harsh words. Therefore, your valuable instruction does not stand in my heart. O learned Brahmana, I want to occupy a position more exalted than any yet achieved within the three worlds by anyone, even by my father and grandfather. If you will oblige, kindly advise me of an honest path to follow by which I can achieve the goal of my life. My dear Lord, you are a worthy son of Lord Brahma, and you travel playing on your musical instrument, the veena, for the welfare of the entire universe. You are like the sun which rotates in the universe for the benefit of all living beings. The sage Maitreya continued. The great personality, Narada Muni, upon hearing the words of Dhruva Maharaja, became very compassionate toward him, and in order to show him his causeless mercy, he gave him the following expert advice. The great sage Narada told Dhruva Maharaja, the instruction given by your mother Suniti to follow the path of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is just suitable for you. You should therefore completely absorb yourself in the devotional service of the Lord. Any person who desires the fruits of the four principles of religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and at the end liberation, should engage himself in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For worship of his lotus feet yields the fulfillment of all of these. Full stop. My dear boy, I therefore wish all good fortune for you. You should go to the bank of the Yamuna, where there is a virtuous forest named Madhuvana, and there be purified. Just by going there, one draws nearer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who always lives there. Narada Muni instructed, My dear boy, in the waters of the Yamuna river, which is known as Kalindi, you should take 3 baths daily because the water is very auspicious, sacred and clear. After bathing, you should perform the necessary regulative principles for Ashtanga Yoga and then sit down on your asana sitting place in a calm and quiet position. After sitting on your seat, practice the 3 kinds of breathing exercises and thus gradually control the life air, the mind, and the senses. Completely free yourself from all material contamination and with great patience begin to meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The form of the Lord is described herein. The Lord's face is perpetually very beautiful and pleasing in attitude. To the devotees who see him, he appears never to be displeased, and he is always prepared to award benedictions to them. His eyes, his nicely decorated eyebrows, his raised nose, and his broad forehead are all very beautiful. He is more beautiful than all the demigods. Narada Muni continued. The Lord's form is always youthful. Every limb and every part of his body is properly formed, free from defect. His eyes and lips are pinkish like the rising sun. He is always prepared to give shelter to the surrendered soul, and anyone so fortunate as to look upon him feels all satisfaction. The Lord is always worthy to be the master of the surrendered soul, for he is the ocean of mercy. The Lord is further described as having a mask of Shivatsa, or the sitting place of the the Lord is further described as having the mark of Shivatsa, or the sitting place of the goddess of fortune, and his bodily hue is deep bluish. The Lord is a person. He wears a garland of flowers, and he is eternally manifest with 4 hands, which hold, beginning from the lower left hand, a conch shell, wheel, club, and lotus flower. The entire body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, is decorated. He wears a valuable jeweled helmet, necklace, and bracelets. His neck is adorned with the Kaustubha jewel, and he is dressed in yellow silk garments. The Lord is decorated with small golden bells around his waist, and his lotus feet are decorated with golden ankle bells. All his bodily features are very attractive and pleasing to the eyes. He is always peaceful, calm and quiet, and very pleasing to the eyes and the mind. Real yogis meditate upon the transcendental form of the Lord, as he stands on the whorl of the lotus of their hearts, and jewel-like nails of his lotus feet glittering. The Lord is always smiling, and the devotee should constantly see the Lord in this form, as he looks very mercifully towards the devotee. In this way, the meditator should look toward the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the bestower of all benedictions. One who meditates in this way, concentrating his mind upon the always auspicious form of the Lord, is very soon freed from all material contamination, and he does not come down from meditation upon the Lord. O son of the king, now I shall speak unto you the mantra which is to be chanted with his process of meditation. One who carefully chants this mantra for 7 nights can see the perfect human being flying in the sky. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This is the 12-syllable mantra for worshipping Lord Krishna. One should install the physical form of the Lord, and with the chanting of the mantra, one should offer flowers and fruits and other varieties of foodstuff exactly according to the rules and regulations prescribed by authorities. But this should be done in consideration of place, time, and attendant conveniences and inconveniences. One should worship the Lord by offering pure water, pure flower garlands, fruits, flowers, and vegetables which are available in the forest, or by collecting newly grown grasses, small buds of flowers, or even the skin of trees, and if possible by offering tulsi leaves, which are very dear to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is possible to worship a form of the Lord made of physical elements such as earth, water, pulp, wood, and metal. In the forest, one can make a form with no more than earth and water and worship him according to the above principles. A devotee who has full control over his self should be very sober and peaceful and must be satisfied. satisfied simply with eating whatever fruits and vegetables are available in the forest. My dear Dhruva, besides worshipping the deity and chanting the mantra 3 times a day, you should meditate upon transcendental activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his different incarnations, as exhibited by his supreme will and personal potencies. One should follow all in the footsteps of previous devotees regarding how to worship the Supreme Lord with the prescribed paraphernalia, or one should offer worship with the heart by reciting the mantra to the personality of Godhead, who is non different from the mantra. Anyone who thus engages in the devotional service of the Lord, seriously and sincerely, with his mind, words, and body, and who is fixed in the activities of the prescribed devotional methods, is blessed by the Lord according to his desire. If a devotee desires material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, or liberation from the material world, he is awarded these results. If one is very serious about liberation, he must stick to the process of transcendental loving service, engaging 24 hours a day in the highest stage of ecstasy, and he must certainly be aloof from all activities of sense gratification. When Dhruva Maharaja, the son of the king, was thus advised by the great sage Narada, he circumambulated Narada, his spiritual master, and offered him respectful obeisances. Then he started for Madhavana, which is always imprinted with the lotus footprints of Lord Krishna, and which is therefore especially auspicious. After Dhruva entered Madhavana forest to execute devotional service, the great sage Narada thought it wise to go to the king to see how he was faring without the palace. When Narada Muni approached, the king received him properly, offering him due obeisances. After being seated comfortably, Narada began to speak. The great sage Narada inquired, "My dear king, your face appears to be withering up, and you look like you have been thinking of something for a very long time. Why is that? Have you been hampered in following your path of religious rites, economic development, and sense gratification?" And the king replied, "O best of the Brahmanas, I am very much addicted to my wife, and am so fallen that I have abandoned all merciful behavior, even to my son, who is only 5 years old. I have banished him and his mother, even though he is a great soul and a great devotee. My dear Brahmana, the face of my son was just like a lotus flower. I am thinking of his precarious condition. He is unprotected, and he might be very hungry. He might have lain down somewhere in the forest, and the wolves might have attacked him to eat his body. Alas, just see how I was conquered by my wife. Just imagine my cruelty. Out of love and affection, the boy was trying to get up on my lap, but I did not receive him, nor did I even pat him for a moment. Just imagine how hard-hearted I am." The great sage Narada replied, "My dear king, please do not be aggravated about your son. He is well protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although you have no actual information on his influence, his reputation is already spread all over the world. My dear king, your son is very competent. He will perform activities which would be impossible even for great kings and sages. Very soon he will complete his task and come back home. You should know that he will also spread your reputation all over the world." The great Maitreya continued. The king, Uttanapada, after being advised by Narada Muni, practically gave up all duties in relation with his kingdom, which was very vast and wide, opulent like the goddess of fortune, and he simply began to think of his son Dhruva. Elsewhere, Dhruva Maharaja, having arrived at Madhavana, took his bath in the river Yamuna and observed fasting in the night with great care and attention. After that, as advised by the great sage Narada, He engaged himself in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For the first month, Dhruva Maharaja ate only fruits and berries on every third day, only to keep his body and soul together. And in this way he progressed in his worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the second month, Dhruva Maharaja ate only every 6 days, and for his eatables he took dry grass and leaves. Thus he continued to worship. In the third month he drank water only every 9 days. Thus he remained completely in trance and worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is adorned by the selected verses. In the fourth month, Dhruva Maharaja became a complete master of the breathing exercise, and thus he inhaled air only every 12th day. In this way he became completely fixed in his position and worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By the fifth month, Maharaja Dhruva, the son of the king, had controlled his breathing and so perfectly that he was able to stand only on one leg, just as a column stands without motion, and concentrate his mind fully on the Parabrahman. He completely controlled his senses and their objects, and in this way he fixed his mind without diversion to anything else upon the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When Dhruva Maharaja thus captured the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the refuge of the total material creation and who is the master of all living entities, the three worlds began to tremble. As Dhruva Maharaja, the king's son, kept himself steadily standing on one leg, the pressure of his big toe pushed down half the earth, just as an elephant being carried on a boat rocks the boat left and right with his every step. When Dhruva Maharaja became practically one in heaviness with Lord Vishnu, the total consciousness due to his fully concentrating and his closing all the holes of his body, the total universal breathing became choked up, and all the great demigods in all the planetary systems suffocated and thus took shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The demigod said, "Dear Lord, you are the refuge of all the moving and non-moving living entities. We feel all living entities to be suffocating, their breathing processes choked up. We have never experienced such a thing. Since you are the ultimate shelter of all surrendered souls, we have therefore approached you. Kindly save us from this danger." The Supreme Personality of Godhead replied, "My dear demigods, do not be perturbed by this. It is due to the severe austerity and full determination of the son of King Uttanapada, who is now fully absorbed in thoughts of me. He has obstructed the universal breathing process. You can safely return to your respective homes. I shall stop this boy in his severe act of austerities, and you will be saved from this situation." Srimad Bhagavatam 4:9. Dhruva Maharaja returns home. The great sage Maitreya told Vidura, when the demigods were thus reassured by the personality of Godhead, they were freed from all fears, and after offering their obeisances, they returned to their heavenly planets. Then the Lord, who is not different from the Sankarshana, from the Sahasrashirsha incarnation, got on the back of Garuda, who carried him to the Madhavana forest to see his servant Dhruva. The form of the Lord, which was brilliant like lightning, and in which Dhruva Maharaja, in his mature yogic process, was fully absorbed in meditation, all of a sudden disappeared. Thus Dhruva was perturbed, and his meditation broke. But as soon as he opened his eyes, he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally present, just as he had been seeing the Lord in his heart. When Dhruva Maharaja saw his Lord just in front of him, he was greatly agitated and offered him obeisances and respect. He fell flat before him like a rod and became absorbed in love of Godhead. Dhruva Maharaja, in ecstasy, looked upon the Lord as if he were drinking the Lord with his eyes, kissing the lotus feet of the Lord with his mouth, and embracing the Lord with his arms. Although Dhruva Maharaja was a small boy, he wanted to offer prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in suitable language, but because he was inexperienced, he could not adjust himself immediately. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, being situated in everyone's heart, could understand Dhruva Maharaja's awkward situation. Out of his causeless mercy, he touched his conch shell to the forehead of Dhruva Maharaja, who stood before him with folded hands. At that time, Dhruva Maharaja became perfectly aware of the Vedic conclusion and understood the absolute truth and his relationship with all living entities. In accordance with the line of devotional service to the Supreme Lord, whose fame is widespread, Dhruva, who in the future would receive a planet which would never be annihilated, even during the time of dissolution, offered his deliberate and conclusive prayers. Dhruva Maharaja said, "My dear Lord, you are all-powerful. After entering within me, you have enlivened all my sleeping senses, my hands, legs, ears, touch sensation, life force, and especially my power of speech. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you. My Lord, you are the Supreme One, but by your different energies, you appear differently in the spiritual and material worlds. You create the total energy of the material world by your external potency, and after creation, you enter within the material world as the Super Soul. You are the Supreme Person, and through the temporary modes of material nature, you create varieties of manifestation, just as fire, entering into wood of different shapes, burns brilliantly in different varieties. O my Master, Lord Brahma is fully surrendered unto you. In the beginning, you gave him knowledge, and thus he could see and understand the entire universe, just as a person awakens from sleep and visualizes his immediate duties. You are the only shelter of all persons who desire liberation, and you are the friend of all who are distressed. And therefore, can a learned person who has perfect knowledge ever forget you? Persons who worship you simply for the sense gratification of this bag of skin are certainly influenced by your illusory energy, in spite of having you, who are like a desire tree and are the cause of liberation from birth and death. Foolish persons, such as me, desire benediction from you for sense gratification, which is available even for those who live in hellish conditions. My Lord, the transcendental bliss derived from meditation upon your lotus feet or hearing about your glories from pure devotees is so unlimited that it is far beyond the stage of Brahmananda, wherein one thinks himself merged in the impersonal Brahman as one with the Supreme. Since Brahmananda is also defeated by the transcendental bliss derived from devotional service, then what to speak of the temporary blissfulness of elevating oneself to the heavenly planets, which is ended by the separating sword of time? Although one may be elevated to the heavenly planets, he falls down in due course of time. Dhruva Maharaja continued, O unlimited Lord, kindly bless me, so that I may associate with great devotees who engage in your transcendental loving service constantly, as the waves of a river constantly flow. Such transcendental devotees are completely situated in an uncontaminated state of life. By the process of devotional service, I shall surely be able to cross the nascent ocean of material existence, which is filled with the waves of blazing fire-like dangers. It will be very easy for me, for I becoming mad to hear about your transcendental qualities and pastimes, which are eternally existent. O Lord, who have a lotus navel, if a person happens to associate with a devotee whose heart always hankers after your lotus feet, seeking always their fragrance, he is never attached to the material body or in a bodiless relationship to offspring, friends, home, wealth, and wife, which are very, very dear to materialistic persons. Indeed, he does not care for them. My lord, O supreme and unborn, I know that the different varieties of living entities, such as animals, trees, birds, reptiles, demigods, and human beings, are spread throughout the universe, which is caused by the total material energy. And I know that they are sometimes manifest and sometimes unmanifest, but I have never experienced the supreme form I behold as I see you now. Now all kinds of methods of theorizing have come to an end. My dear Lord, at the end of each millennium, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, dissolves everything manifested within the universe into his belly. He lies down on the lap of Sheshanaga, from his navel sprouts a golden lotus flower on a stem, and on that lotus Lord Brahma is created. I can understand that you are the same Supreme Godhead. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto you. My Lord, by your unbroken transcendental glance, you are the supreme witness of all stages of intellectual activities. You are eternally liberated. Your existence is situated in pure goodness, and you are existent in the Supersoul without change. You are the original personality of Godhead, full with six opulences, and you are eternally the master of the three modes of material nature. Thus, you are always different from the ordinary living entities. As Lord Vishnu, you maintain all the affairs of the entire universe. And yet, you stand aloof and are the enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices. My dear Lord, in your impersonal manifestation of Brahman, there are always two opposing elements, knowledge and ignorance. Your multi-energies are continually manifest. But the impersonal Brahman, which is undivided, original, changeless, unlimited, and blissful, is the cause of the material manifestation. Because you are the same impersonal Brahman, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. My Lord, O Supreme Lord, you are the supreme personified form of all benediction. Therefore, for one who abides in your devotional service with no other desire, worshipping your lotus feet is better than becoming king and lording it over a kingdom. That is the benediction of worshipping your lotus feet. To ignorant devotees like me, you are the causelessly merciful maintainer, just like a cow who takes care of their newly born calf by supplying milk and giving protection from attack. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, when Dhruva Maharaja, who had good intentions in his heart, finished his prayer, the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, who is very kind to his devotees and servants, congratulated him, speaking as follows. The personality of Godhead said, My dear Dhruva, son of the king, you have executed pious vows, and I also know the desire within your heart. Although your desire is very ambitious and very difficult to fulfill, I shall favor you with its fulfillment. All good fortune unto you. The Supreme Personality of Godhead continued, My dear Dhruva, I shall award you the glowing planet known as the Pole Star, which will continue to exist even after the dissolution at the end of the millennium. No one has ever ruled this planet, which is surrounded by all the solar system's planets and stars. All the luminaries in the sky circumambulate this planet, just as bulls tread around a central pole for the purpose of crushing grains, keeping the pole star to their right. All the stars inhabited by the great sages like Dharma, Agni, Kashyapa, and Shukra circumambulate this planet, which continues to exist even after the dissolution of all others. After your father goes to the forest and awards you the rule of his kingdom, you will rule continuously the entire world for 36,000 years, and all your senses will continue to be as strong as they are now. You will never become old. The Lord continued, sometime in the future your brother Uttama will go hunting in the forest, and while absorbed in hunting, he will be killed. Your stepmother Suruchi, being maddened upon the death of your son, will go to search him out in the forest, and she will be devoured by a forest fire. The Lord continued, I am the heart of all sacrifices. You will be able to perform many great sacrifices and also give great charities. In this way, you will be able to enjoy the blessings of material happiness in this life. And at the time of your death, you will be able to remember me. The personality of Godhead continued, my dear Dhruva, after your material life in this body, you will go to my planet, which is always offered obeisances by the residents of all other planetary systems. It is situated above the planets of 7 rishis, and having gone there, you will never have to come back again to this material world. The great sage Maitreya said, after being worshipped and honored by the boy, Dhruva Maharaja, and after offering him his abode, Lord Vishnu, on the back of Garuda, returned to his abode as Dhruva Maharaja looked on. Despite having achieved the desired result of his determination by worshipping the lotus feet of the Lord, Dhruva Maharaja was not very pleased. Thus he returned to his home. Sri Vidura inquired, my dear Brahmana, the abode of the Lord is very difficult to attain. It can be attained only by pure devotional service, which alone pleases the most affectionate, merciful Lord. Dhruva Maharaja achieved this position even in one life, and he was very wise and conscientious. Why then was he not very pleased? Maitreya answered, Dhruva Maharaja's heart, which was pierced with the arrows of the harsh words of his stepmother, was greatly aggrieved. And thus, when he fixed upon his goal of life, he did not forget her misbehavior. He did not demand actual liberation from this material world, but at the end of his devotional service, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared before him, he was simply ashamed of the material demands he had in his mind. Dhruva Maharaja thought to himself, to endeavor to be situated in the shade of the lotus feet of the Lord is not an ordinary task, because even the great brahmacharis, headed by Sanandana, who practiced Ashtanga Yoga in trance, attained the shelter of the Lord's lotus feet only after many, many births. Within 6 months, I achieved the same result, yet due to my thinking differently from the Lord, I fell down from my position. Alas, just look at me. I am so unfortunate. I approach the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can immediately cut the chain of the repetition of births and deaths, but still, out of my foolishness, I prayed for things which are perishable. Since all the demigods who are situated in the higher planetary system will have to come down again, they are all envious of my being elevated to Vaikuntha Loka by devotional service. These intolerant demigods have dissipated my intelligence, and only for this reason Could I not accept the genuine benediction of the instruction of sage Narada? Dhruva Maharaja lamented. I was under the influence of the illusory energy. Being ignorant of the actual facts, I was sleeping on her lap. Under a vision of duality, I saw my brother as my enemy, and falsely I lamented with my heart, thinking, they are my enemies. It is very difficult to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but in my case, although I have satisfied the Supersoul of the whole universe, I have prayed only for useless things. My activities were exactly like treatment given to a person who is already dead. Just to see how unfortunate I am. For in spite of meeting the Supreme Lord who can cut one's link with birth and death, I have prayed for the same conditions again. Because of my state of complete foolishness and paucity of pious activities, although the Lord offered me his personal service, I wanted material name, fame, and prosperity. My case is just like that of a poor woman who, while she satisfied a great emperor who wanted to give him anything he might ask, my case is just like of a poor man who, when he satisfied a great emperor who wanted to give him anything he might ask, out of ignorance asked only a few broken grains of husked rice. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, persons like you, who are pure devotees of the lotus feet of Mukunda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead who can offer liberation, and who are always attached to the honey of his lotus feet, are always satisfied in serving the lotus feet of the Lord. In any condition of life, such persons remain satisfied, and thus they never ask the Lord for material prosperity. When King Uttanapada heard that his son Dhruva was coming back home, as if coming back to life after death, he could not put his faith in this message, for he was doubtful of how it could happen. He considered himself the most wretched, and therefore he thought that it was not possible for him to attain such good fortune. Although he could not believe the words of the messenger, he had full faith in the word of the great sage Narada. Thus he was greatly overwhelmed by the news, and he immediately offered the messenger a highly valuable necklace in great satisfaction. Then King Uttanapada, being very eager to see the face of his lost son, mounted a chariot drawn by excellent horses, and bedecked with golden filigree, taking with him many learned brahmanas, all the elderly personalities of his family, his officers, his ministers, and his immediate friends. He immediately left the city. As he proceeded in this parade, there were auspicious sounds of conch shells, kettle drums, flutes, and the chanting of Vedic mantras to indicate all good fortune. Both the queens of King Uttanapada, namely Suniti and Suruchi, along with his other son Uttama, appeared in the procession. The queens were seated on a palanquin. Upon seeing Dhruva Maharaja approaching the neighboring small forest, King Uttanapada with great haste got down from his chariot. He had been very anxious for a long time to see his son Dhruva, and therefore with great love and affection he went forward to embrace his long-lost boy. Breathing very heavily, the king embraced him with both arms. But Dhruva Maharaja was not the same as before. He was completely sanctified by spiritual advancement due to having been touched by the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Reunion with Dhruva Maharaja fulfilled King Uttanapada's long-cherished desire, and for this reason he smelled Dhruva's head again and again and bathed him with torrents of very cold tears. Then Dhruva Maharaja, the foremost of all nobles, first of all offered his obeisances at the feet of his father and was honored by his father with various questions. He then bowed his head at the feet of his two mothers, Suruchi, the younger mother of Dhruva Maharaja, seeing that the innocent boy had fallen at her feet, immediately picked him up, embracing him with her hands. With tears of feeling, she blessed him with the words, "My dear boy, long may you live." Unto one who was transcendental, who has transcendental qualities due to friendly behavior with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all living entities offer honor, just as water automatically flows down by nature. The two brothers Uttama and Dhruva Maharaja also exchanged their tears. They were overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love and affection, and when they embraced one another, the hair on their bodies stood up. Suniti, the real mother of Dhruva Maharaja, embraced the tender boy of her son, who was dearer to her than her own life, and thus forgot all material grief, for she was very pleased. My dear Vidura, Suniti was the mother of a great hero. Her tears, together with the milk flowing from her breasts, wet the whole body of Dhruva Maharaja. This was a great auspicious sign. The residents of the place praised the queen. "Dear queen, your beloved son was lost a long time ago, and it is your great fortune that he now has come back. It appears, therefore, that your son will be able to protect you from a very long time, and will put an end to all your material pangs. Dear queen, you must have worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who delivers his devotees from the greatest danger. Persons who constantly meditate upon him surpass the cause of birth and death. This perfection is very difficult to achieve." The sage Maitreya continued, "My dear Vidura, when everyone was thus praising Dhruva Maharaja, the king was very happy, and he had Dhruva and his brother seated on the back of the she-elephant. Thus he returned to his capital, where he was praised by all classes of men. The whole city was decorated with columns of banana trees containing bunches of fruit and flowers, and betel nut trees with leaves and branches were seen here and there. There were also many gates set up which were structured to give the appearance of sharks. At each and every gate there were burning lamps and big water pots decorated with different colored cloths, strings of pearls, flower garlands, and hanging mango leaves. In the capital city there were many places, city gates and surrounding walls, which were already very, very beautiful, and on this occasion all of them were decorated with golden ornaments. The domes of the city palaces glittered, as did the domes of the beautiful airplanes which hovered over the city. All the quadrangles, lanes, and streets of the city, and the raised sitting places at the crossings were thoroughly cleansed and sprinkled with sandalwood water, and auspicious grains such as rice and barley and flowers, fruit, and many other auspicious presentations were scattered all over the city. Thus, as Dhruva Maharaj passed on the road from every palace in the neighborhood, all the gentle household ladies assembled to see him, and out of maternal affection they offered their blessings, showering him with white mustard seed, barley, curd, water, newly grown grass, fruits, and flowers. In this way, Dhruva Maharaja, while hearing the pleasing songs sung by the ladies, entered the palace of his father. Dhruva Maharaja thereafter lived in his father's palace, which had walls bedecked with highly valuable jewels. His affectionate father took particular care of him, and he dwelled in that house just as the demigods live in their palaces in the higher planetary systems. The bedding in the palace was as white as the foam of milk, and was very soft. The bedsteads were made of ivory with embellishments of gold, and chairs, benches, and other sitting places and furniture were made of gold. The palace of the king was surrounded by walls made of marble, with many engravings made of valuable jewels like sapphires, which depicted beautiful women with shining jewels lamps in their hands. The king's residence was surrounded by gardens, wherein there were varieties of trees brought from the heavenly planets. In those trees there were pairs of sweetly singing birds and almost mad bumblebees, which made a very relishable buzzing sound. There were emerald staircases, which led to lakes full of variously colored lotus flowers and lilies, and swans, karandavas, chakravakas, cranes, and similar other valuable birds were visible in those lakes. The saintly king Uttanapada, hearing of the glorious deeds of Dhruva Maharaja and personally seeing also how influential and great he was, felt very satisfied, for Dhruva's activities were wonderful to the supreme degree. When after concentration King Uttanapada saw that Dhruva Maharaj was suitably mature to take charge of the kingdom, and that his ministers were agreeable and the citizens were also very fond of him, he enthroned Dhruva as emperor of this planet. After considering his advanced age and deliberating of the welfare of his spiritual self, King Uttanapada detached himself from worldly affairs and entered the forest. Srimad Bhagavatam 4.10. Dhruva Maharaja's fight with the Yakshas. The great sage Maitreya said, "My dear Vidura, thereafter Dhruva Maharaja married the daughter of Prajapati Shishumara, whose name was Brahmi, and two sons named Kalpa and Vatsara were born of her. The greatly powerful Dhruva Maharaja had another wife named Ila, who was the daughter of the demigod Vayu. By her he begot a son named Utkala and a very beautiful daughter. Dhruva Maharaja's younger brother Uttama, who was still unmarried, once went on a hunting excursion and was killed by a powerful Yaksha in the Himalaya mountains. Along with him, his mother Suruchi also followed the path of her son. She died. When Dhruva Maharaja heard of the killing of his brother Uttama by the Yakshas in the Himalayan mountains, being overwhelmed with lamentation and anger, he got on his chariot and went out for victory over the city of the Yakshas, Alakapuri. Dhruva Maharaja went to the northern direction of the Himalayan range. In a valley he saw a city full of ghostly persons who were followers of Lord Shiva. Maitreya continued, "My dear Vidura, as soon as Dhruva Maharaja reached Alakapuri, he immediately blew his conch shell, and the sound of reverberated throughout the entire sky and in every direction. The wives of the Yakshas became very much frightened. From their eyes it was apparent that they were full of anxiety. O hero Vidura, the greatly powerful heroes of the Yakshas, unable to tolerate the resounding vibration of the conch shell of Dhruva Maharaja, came forth from their city with weapons and attacked Dhruva. Dhruva Maharaja, who was a great charioteer and certainly a great bowman, also immediately began to kill them by simultaneously discharging arrows 3 at a time. When the heroes of the Yakshas saw that all their heads were being thus threatened by Dhruva Maharaja, they could very easily understand their awkward position, and they concluded that they would certainly be defeated. But as heroes, they lauded the action of Dhruva. Just like serpents, who cannot tolerate being trampled upon by anyone's feet, the Yakshas, being intolerant of the wonderful powers of Dhruva Maharaja, threw twice as many arrows, 6 from each of the soldiers, and thus they very valiantly exhibited their powers. The Yaksha soldiers were 130,000 strong, all greatly angry and all desiring to defeat the wonderful activities of Dhruva Maharaja. With full strength they showered upon Maharaja Dhruva, along with the chariot and charioteer, various types of feathered arrows, parikas, iron puncheons, nistrimshas, swords, prasasulas, tridents, paravadhas, lances, saktis, pikes, rishtis, spears, and bhushundi, weapons. Dhruva Maharaja was completely covered by an incessant shower of weapons, just as a mountain is covered by incessant rainfall. All the cedars from the high planetary systems were observing the fight from the sky, and when they saw that Dhruva Maharaja had been covered by the incessant arrows of the enemy, they roared tumultuously, "The grandson of Manu, Dhruva, is now lost." They cried that Dhruva Maharaja was just like the sun that now had set within the oceans of the Yakshas. The Yakshas, being temporarily victorious, exclaimed that they had conquered Dhruva Maharaja, but in the meantime Dhruva's chariot suddenly appeared, just as the sun suddenly appears from within foggy mist. Dhruva Maharaja's bow and arrows twanged and hissed, causing lamentation in the hearts of his enemies. He began to shoot incessant arrows, shattering all their different weapons, just as the blasting wind scattered the assembled clouds in the sky. The sharp arrows released from the bow of Dhruva Maharaja pierced the shields and bodies of the enemy, like the thunderbolts released by the King of Heaven, which dismantled the bodies of the mountains. The great sage Maitreya continued, "My dear Vidura, the heads of those who were cut to pieces by the arrows of Dhruva Maharaja were decorated very beautifully with earrings and turbans. The legs of their bodies were so beautiful as golden palm trees. Their arms were decorated with golden bracelets and armlets. On their heads there were very valuable helmets bedecked with gold. All those ornaments lying in that battlefield were very attractive and could bewilder the mind of a hero. The remaining Yakshas, who somehow or other were not killed, had their limbs cut to pieces by the arrows of the great warrior Dhruva Maharaja. Thus they began to flee, just as elephants flee when defeated by a lion. Dhruva Maharaja, the best of human beings, observed that in that great battlefield not one of the opposing soldiers was left standing with proper weapons. He then desired to see the city of Alakapuri, but he thought to himself, "No one knows the plans of the mystic Yakshas." In the meantime, while Dhruva Maharaja, doubtful of his mystic enemies, was talking with his charioteer, they heard a tremendous sound as if the whole ocean were there, and they found that from the sky a great dust storm was coming over them from all directions. Within a moment, the whole sky was overcast with dense clouds, and severe thundering was heard. There were glittering electric lightning and severe rainfall. My dear faultless Vidura, in that rainfall there was blood, mucus, pus, stool, urine, and marrow falling heavily before Dhruva Maharaja, and there were trunks of bodies falling from the sky. Next, a great mountain was visible in the sky, and from all directions hailstones fell, along with lances, clubs, swords, iron budgeons, and great pieces of stone. Dhruva Maharaja also saw many big serpents, with angry eyes vomiting forth fire and coming to devour him, along with group of mad elephants, lions, and tigers. Then, as if it were the time of the dissolution of the whole world, the fierce sea with foaming waves and great roaring sounds came forward before him. The demon Yakshas are by nature very heinous, and by their demoniac power of illusion they can create many strange phenomena to frighten one who is less intelligent. When the great sages heard that Dhruva Maharaj was overpowered by the illusory mystic tricks of the demons, they immediately assembled to offer him auspicious encouragement. All the sages said, "Dear Dhruva, O son of King Uttanapada, may the Supreme Personality of Godhead know as may the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Sarngathanva, who relieves the distress of his devotees, kill all your threatening enemies. The holy name of the Lord is as powerful as the Lord himself. Therefore, simply by chanting and hearing the holy name of the Lord, many men can be fully protected from fierce death without difficulty. Thus a devotee is saved." Srimad Bhagavatam 4:11. Swayambhuva Manu advises Dhruva Maharaja to stop fighting. Sri Maitreya said, "My dear Vidura, when Dhruva Maharaja heard the encouraging words of the great sages, he performed the Achamana by touching water and then took up his arrow made by Lord Narayana and fixed it upon his bow. As soon as Dhruva Maharaja joined the Narayana Nastra arrow to his bow, the illusion created by the Yakshas was immediately vanquished. Just as all material pains and pleasures are vanquished when one becomes fully cognizant of the self. Even as Dhruva Maharaja fixed the weapon made by Narayana Rishi onto his bow, arrows with golden shafts and feathers like the wings of a swan flew out from it. They entered the enemy soldiers with a great hissing sound, just as peacocks enter a forest with tumultuous crowing. Those sharp arrows dismayed the enemy soldiers, who became almost unconscious, but various Yakshas on the battlefield in a range against Dhruva Maharaja somehow or other collected their weapons and attacked. Just as serpents agitated by Garuda rush towards Garuda with upraised hooves, all the Yaksha soldiers prepared to overcome Dhruva Maharaja with their upraised weapons. When Dhruva Maharaja saw the Yakshas coming forward, he immediately took his arrows and cut the enemies to pieces. Separating their arms, legs, heads, and bellies from their bodies, he delivered the Yakshas to the planetary system, which is situated above the sun globe, and which is attainable only by first-class brahmacharis who have never discharged their semen. When Swayambhuva Manu saw that his grandson Dhruva Maharaj was killing so many of the Yakshas who were not actually offenders, out of his great compassion, he approached Dhruva with great sages to give him good instruction. Lord Manu said, "My dear son, please stop. It is not good to become unnecessarily angry. It is the path of hellish life. Now you are going beyond the limit by killing Yakshas who are actually not offenders. My dear son, the killing of the sinless Yakshas which you have undertaken is not at all approved by authorities, and it does not benefit our family, which is supposed to know the laws of religion and irreligion. My dear son, it has been proved that you are very much affectionate towards your brother and are greatly aggrieved at being killed by the Yakshas. But just consider, for one Yaksha's offense you have killed many others who are innocent. One should not accept the body as the self and thus, like the animals, kill the bodies of the others. This is especially forbidden by saintly persons who follow the path of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is very difficult to achieve the spiritual abode of Hari in the Vaikuntha planets, but you are so fortunate that you are already destined to go to that abode by worshipping him as the supreme abode of all living entities. Because you are a pure devotee of the Lord is always thinking of you. And you are also recognized by all his confidential devotees. Your life is meant for exemplary behavior. I am therefore surprised. Why have you undertaken such an abominable task? The Lord is very satisfied with his devotee when the devotee greets other people with tolerance, mercy, friendship, and equality. One who actually satisfies the Supreme Personality of Godhead during one's lifetime becomes liberated from the gross and subtle material conditions. Thus, being freed from all material modes of nature, he achieves unlimited spiritual bliss. The creation of the material world begins with the five elements, and thus everything, including the body of a man or a woman, is created of these elements. By the sexual life of a man and woman, the number of men and women in this material world is further increased. Manu continued, My dear King Dhruva, it is simply by the illusory material energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and by the interaction of the three modes of material nature that creation, maintenance, and annihilation take place. My dear Dhruva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is uncontaminated by the material mode of nature. He is the remote cause of the creation of this material cosmic manifestation. When he gives the impetus, many other causes and effects are produced, and thus the whole universe moves just as iron moves by the integrated force of a magnet. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his inconceivable supreme energy, time, causes the interaction of the three modes of material nature, and thus varieties of energy become manifest. It appears that he is acting, but he is not the actor. He is killing, but he is not the killer. Thus it is understood that only by his inconceivable power is everything happening. My dear Dhruva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is ever existing, but in the form of time, he is the killer of everything. He has no beginning, although he is the beginning of everything, nor is he ever exhaustible, although everything is exhausted in due course of time. The living entities are created through the agency of the Father and killed through the agency of death. But he is perpetually free of birth and death. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, and in his feature of eternal time, is present in the material world and is neutral towards everyone. No one is his ally, and no one is his enemy. Within the jurisdiction of this time element, everyone enjoys or suffers the result of his own karma or fruitive activities. As when the wind blows, small particles of dust fly in the air, so according to one's particular karma, one suffers or enjoys material life. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, is all-powerful, and he awards the results of one's fruitive activities. Thus, although one living entity's duration of life is very small, whereas that of another is very great. He is always in his transcendental position, and there is no question of lessening or increasing his duration of life. The differentiation among varieties of life and their suffering and enjoyment is explained by some to be the result of karma. Others say it is due to nature, others due to time, others due to fate, and still others say that it is due to desire. The absolute truth, transcendence, is never subject to understanding of imperfect sensory endeavor, nor is he subject to direct experience. He is the master of varieties of energies, like the full material energy, and no one can understand his plans or actions. Therefore, it should be concluded that although he is the original cause of all causes, no one can know him by mental speculation. My dear son, those Yakshas who are descendants of Kuvera are not actually the killers of your brother. The birth and death of every living entity are caused by the Supreme, who is certainly the cause of all causes. The Supreme Personality of Godhead creates this material world, maintains it, and annihilates it in due course of time. But because he is transcendental to such activities, he is never affected by ego in such action or by the modes of material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supersoul of all living entities. He is the controller and maintainer of everyone. Through the agency of his external energy, he creates, maintains, and annihilates everyone. My dear boy Dhruva, please surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the ultimate goal of the progress of the world. Everyone, including the demigods, headed by Lord Brahma, is working under his control, just as a bull, prompted by a rope in his nose, is controlled by its owner. My dear Dhruva, at the age of only 5 years, you were very grievously afflicted by the words of your mother's co-wife, and you very boldly gave up the protection of your mother and went to the forest to engage in the yogic process for realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As a result of this, you have already achieved the topmost position in all the 3 worlds. Therefore, my dear Dhruva, please turn your attention to the Supreme Person, who is the infallible Brahman. Face the Supreme Personality of Godhead in your original position, and thus, by self-realization, you will find this material differentiation to be merely flickering. Thus, regarding your natural position and rendering service unto the Supreme Lord, who is the all-powerful reservoir of all pleasure and who lives in all living entities as the Supersoul, you will very soon forget the illusory understanding of I and my. My dear King, just consider what I have said to you, which will act as medicinal treatment upon disease. Control your anger, for anger is the most enemy of the path of spiritual realization. I wish all good fortune for you. Please follow my instructions. A person who desires liberation from this material world should not fall under the control of anger, because when bewildered by anger, one becomes a source of dread for all others. My dear Dhruva, you thought that the Yakshas killed your brother, and therefore you have killed a great number of them. But by this action you have agitated the mind of Lord Shiva's brother Kuvera, who is the treasurer of the demigods. Please note that your actions have been very disrespectful to Kuvera and Lord Shiva. For this reason, my son, you should immediately pacify Kuvera with gentle words and prayers, and thus his wrath may not affect our family. Thus, Swayambhuva Manu, after giving instruction to Dhruva Maharaja, his grandson, received respectful obeisances from him. Then Lord Manu and the great sages went back to their respective homes. Srimad Bhagavatam 4.12. Dhruva Maharaja goes back to Godhead. The great sage Maitreya said, My dear Vidura, Dhruva Maharaja's anger subsided, and he completely ceased killing Yakshas. When Kuvera, the most blessed master of the treasury, learned this news, he appeared before Dhruva. While being worshipped by Yakshas, Kinnaras, and Charanas, he spoke to Dhruva Maharaja, who stood before him with folded hands. The master of the treasury Kuvera said, O sinless son of Kshatriya, I am very glad to know that under the instruction of your grandfather you have given up your enmity, although it is very difficult to avoid. I am very pleased with you. Actually, you have not killed the Yakshas, nor have they killed your brother, for the ultimate cause of generation and annihilation is the eternal time feature of the Supreme Lord. Misidentification of yourself and others as I and you on the basis of your bodily concept of life is a product of ignorance. This bodily concept is the cause of repeated births and deaths, and it makes us go on continuously in material existence. My dear Dhruva, come forward. May the Lord always grace you with good fortune. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond our sensory perception, is the super soul of all living entities, and thus all entities are one, without distinction. Therefore, begin rendering service unto the transcendental form of the Lord, who is the ultimate shelter of all living entities. Engage yourself fully, therefore, in the devotional service of the Lord, for only He can deliver us from the entanglement of materialistic existence. Although the Lord is attained to His material potency, He is aloof from her activities. Everything in this material world is happening by the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My dear Dhruva Maharaja, son of Maharaja Uttanapada, we have heard that you are constantly engaged in transcendental loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known for his lotus navel. You are therefore worthy to take all benedictions from us. Please, therefore, ask without hesitation whatever benediction you want from me. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, when thus asked to accept a benediction from Kuvera, the Yaksha Raja, king of Yakshas, Dhruva Maharaja, that most elevated pure devotee, who was an intelligent and thoughtful king, begged that he might have unflinching faith in and remembrance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for thus a person can cross over the ocean of nations very easily, although it is very difficult for others to cross. The son of Idavida, Lord Kuvera, was very pleased, and happily he gave Dhruva Maharaja the benediction he wanted. Thereafter he disappeared from Dhruva's presence, and Dhruva Maharaja returned to his capital city. As long as he remained at home, Dhruva Maharaja performed many great ceremonial sacrifices in order to please the enjoyer of all sacrifices, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prescribed ceremonial sacrifices are especially meant to please Lord Vishnu, who is the objective of all such sacrifices and who awards the resultant benedictions. Dhruva Maharaja rendered devotional service unto the Supreme, the reservoir of everything, with unrelenting force. While carrying out his devotional service to the Lord, he could see that everything is situated in him only, and that he is situated in all living entities. The Lord is called Achyuta because he never fails in his prime duty to give protection to his devotees. Dhruva Maharaja was endowed with all godly qualities. He was very respectful to the devotees of the Supreme Lord and very kind to the poor and innocent, and he protected religious principles. With all these qualifications, he was considered to be the direct father of all the citizens. Dhruva Maharaja ruled over this planet for 36,000 years. He diminished the reactions of pious activities by enjoyment, and by practicing austerities he diminished inauspicious reactions. The self-controlled great soul Dhruva Maharaja thus passed many years favorably, executing three kinds of worldly activities, namely religiosity, economic development, and satisfaction of all material desires. Thereafter he handed over the charge of the royal throne to his son. Srila Dhruva Maharaja realized that this cosmic manifestation bewilders living entities like a dream of phantasmagoria, because it is a creation of the illusory external energy of the Supreme Lord. Thus, Dhruva Maharaja at the end left his kingdom, which extended all over the earth and was bounded by the great oceans. He considered his body, his wife, his children, his friends, his army, his rich treasury, his very comfortable palaces, and his many enjoyable pleasure grounds to be creations of the illusory energy. Thus, in due course of time, he retired to the forest of the Himalayas known as Badarikashrama. In Badarikashrama, Dhruva Maharaja's senses became completely purified because he bathed regularly in the crystal clear purified water. He fixed his sitting position and by yogic practice controlled the breathing process and the air of life. In this way his senses were completely withdrawn. Then he concentrated his mind on the Archa Vigraha form of the Lord, which is the exact replica of the Lord and thus meditating upon him entered into complete trance. Because of his transcendental bliss, incessant tears flowed from his eyes, his heart melted, and there was shivering and standing of the hairs all over his body. Thus transformed in a trance of devotional service, Dhruva Maharaja completely forgot his bodily existence, and thus he immediately became liberated from material bondage. As soon as the symptoms of his liberation were manifest, he saw a very beautiful airplane coming down from the sky, as if the brilliant full moon were coming down, illuminating all the 10 directions. Dhruva Maharaja saw 2 very beautiful associates of Lord Vishnu in the plane. They had 4 hands and a blackish bodily luster. They were very youthful, and their eyes were just like reddish lotus flowers. They held clubs in their hands, and they were dressed in very attractive garments with helmets, and were decorated with necklaces, bracelets, and earrings. Dhruva Maharaja, seeing that these uncommon personalities were direct servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, immediately stood up. But being puzzled in hasteness, he forgot how to receive them in the proper way. Therefore he simply offered obeisances with folded hands and chanted and glorified the holy names of the Lord. Dhruva Maharaja was always absorbed in thinking of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. His heart was full with Krishna. When the 2 confidential servants of the Supreme Lord, who were named Nanda and Sunanda, approached him, smiling happily, Dhruva stood with folded hands, bowing humbly. They then addressed him as follows. Nanda and Sunanda, the 2 confidential associates of Lord Vishnu, said, "Dear King, let there be all good fortune unto you. Please attentively hear what we shall say. When you were only 5 years old, you underwent severe austerities, and you thereby greatly satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We are representatives of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Creator of the whole universe, who carried in his hand the bow named Changa. We have been specifically deputed to take you to the spiritual world. To achieve Vishnu Loka is very difficult, but by your austerity you have conquered. Even the great rishis and demigods cannot achieve this position. Simply to see the supreme abode, the Vishnu planet, the sun and moon, and all the other planets, stars, lunar mansions, and solar systems are circumambulating it. Now, please come. You are welcome to go there. Dear King Dhruva, neither your forefathers nor anyone else before you ever achieved such a transcendental planet. The planet known as Vishnu Loka, where Lord Vishnu personally resides, is the highest of all. It is worshipable by the inhabitants of all other planets within the universe. Please come with us and live there eternally. O immortal one, this unique airplane has been sent by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is worshipped by selected prayers, and who is the chief of all living entities. You are quite worthy to board such a plane." The great sage Maitreya continued. Maharaja Dhruva was very dear to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When he heard the sweet speeches of the Lord's chief associates in the Vaikuntha planet, he immediately took his sacred bath, dressed himself with suitable ornaments, and performed his daily spiritual duties. Thereafter, he offered his spiritual obeisances to the great sages present there and accepted their blessings. Before getting aboard, Dhruva Maharaja worshipped the airplane, circumambulated it, and also offered obeisances of the associates of Vishnu. In the meantime, he became as brilliant and illuminating as molten gold. He thus completely prepared to board the transcendental plane. When Dhruva Maharaja was attempting to get on the transcendental plane, he saw death personified approaching him. Not caring for death, however, he took advantage of the opportunity to put his feet on the head of death, and thus he got up on the airplane, which was as big as a house. At that time, drums and kettle drums resounded from the sky, the chief Gandharvas began to sing, and other demigods showered flowers like torrents of rain upon Dhruva Maharaja. Dhruva was seated in the transcendental airplane, which was just about to start, when he remembered his poor mother, Suniti. He thought to himself, "How shall I go alone to the Vaikuntha planet and leave behind my poor mother?" The great associates of Vaikuntha Loka, Nanda and Sunanda, could understand the mind of Dhruva Maharaja, and thus they showed him that his mother Suniti was going forward in another plane. While Dhruva Maharaja was passing through space, he gradually saw all the planets of the solar system, and on the path he saw all the demigods in their airplanes showering flowers upon him like rain. Dhruva Maharaja thus surpassed the 7 planetary systems of the great sages who are known as Saptarshi. Beyond that region, he achieved the transcendental situation of permanent life in the planet where Lord Vishnu lives. The self-effulgent Vaikuntha planets, by whose illumination alone all the illuminating planets within this material world give off reflected light, cannot be reached by those who are not merciful to other living entities. Only persons who constantly engage in welfare activities for other living entities can reach the Vaikuntha planets. Persons who are peaceful, equipoised, cleansed and purified, and who know the art of pleasing all other living entities, keep friendship only with devotees of the Lord. They alone can very easily achieve the perfection of going back home, back to Godhead. In this way, the fully Krishna-conscious Dhruva Maharaja and the exalted son of Maharaja Uttanapada attained the summit of the 3 statuses of planetary system. Saint Maitreya continued, "My dear Vidura, descendant of Kuru, and the herd of bulls as the herd of bulls circumambulates a central pole of their on their right side, all the luminaries within the universal sky unceasingly circumambulate the abode of Dhruva Maharaja with great force and speed." After observing the glories of Dhruva Maharaja, the great sage Narada, playing his veena, went to the sacrificial arena of the Prachetas and very happily chanted the following 3 verses. The great sage Narada said, "Simply by the influence of his spiritual advancement and powerful austerity, Dhruva Maharaja, the son of Suniti, who was devoted to her husband, acquired an exalted position not possible to attain, even for the so-called Vedantists or strict followers of the Vedic principles, not to speak of ordinary human beings." The great sage Narada continued, "Just see how Dhruva Maharaja, aggrieved at the harsh words of his stepmother, went to the forest at the age of only 5 years, and under my direction underwent austerity. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead is unconquerable, Dhruva Maharaja defeated him with the specific qualifications possessed by the Lord's devotees. Dhruva Maharaja attained an exalted position at the age of only 5 or 6 years after undergoing austerity for 6 months. Alas, a great Kshatriya cannot achieve such a position even after undergoing austerities for many, many years." The great sage Maitreya continued, "My dear Vidura, whatever you have asked from me about the great reputation and character of Dhruva Maharaja, I have explained it to you in all detail. The great saintly persons and devotees very much like to hear about Dhruva Maharaja. By hearing the narration of Dhruva Maharaja, one can fulfill desires for wealth, reputation, and increased duration of life. It is so auspicious that one can even go to a heavenly planet or attain Dhruvaloka, which was achieved by Dhruva Maharaja just by hearing about him. The demigods also become pleased because this narration is so glorious and it is so powerful that it can counteract all the results of one's sinful actions. Anyone who hears the narration of Dhruva Maharaja and who repeatedly tries to, with faith and devotion, to understand his pure character, attains the pure devotional platform and executes pure devotional service. By such activities, one can diminish the threefold miserable conditions of material life. Anyone who hears this narration of Dhruva Maharaja acquires exalted qualities like him. For anyone who desires greatness, powers, or influence, here is the process by which to acquire them. And for thoughtful men who want adoration, here is the proper means. The great sage Maitreya recommended. One should chant of the character and activities of Dhruva Maharaja both in the morning and in the evening with great attention and care, in a society of brahmanas or other twice-born persons. Persons who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord should recite this narration of Dhruva Maharaja without taking remuneration. Specifically, recitation is recommended on the full moon or dark moon day, on the day of the Ekadashi, on the appearance of the Shravana star, at the end of particular tithi, or the occasion of Vyatipata at the end of the month, or on Sunday. Such recitation should of course be performed before a favorable audience. When recitation is performed this way without professional motive, the reciter and audience become perfect. The narration of Dhruva Maharaja is sublime knowledge for the attainment of immortality. Persons unaware of the absolute truth can be led to the path of truth. Those who out of transcendental kindness take on the responsibility of becoming master protectors of the poor living entities automatically gain the interest and blessings of the demigods. The transcendental activities of Dhruva Maharaja are well known all over the world and they are very pure. In childhood, Dhruva Maharaja rejected all kinds of toys and playthings, left the protection of his mother, and seriously took shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. My dear Vidura, I therefore conclude this narration, for I have described to you all its details. Srimad Bhagavatam 4.13. Description of the descendants of Dhruva Maharaja. Suta Goswami, continuing to speak to all the rishis headed by Shaunaka, said, after hearing Maitreya Rishi describe Dhruva Maharaja's ascent to Lord Vishnu's abode, Vidura became very much enlightened in devotional emotion, and he inquired from Maitreya as follows. Vidura inquired from Maitreya, O greatly advanced devotee, who were the Prachetas? To which family did they belong? Whose sons were they, and where did they perform the great sacrifices? Vidura continued, I know that the great sage Narada is the greatest of all devotees. He has compiled the Pancharatrika procedure of devotional service and has directly met the Supreme Personality of Godhead. While all the Prachetas were executing religious rituals and sacrificial ceremonies, and thus worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his satisfaction, the great sage Narada described the transcendental qualities of Dhruva Maharaja. My dear Brahmana, how did Narada Muni glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And what pastimes were described in that meeting? I am very eager to hear of them. Kindly explain, fully about that glorification of the Lord. The great sage Maitreya replied, "My dear Vidura, when Maharaja Dhruva departed for the forest, his son Utkala did not desire to accept the opulent throne of his father, which was meant for the ruler of all the lands of this planet. From his very birth, Utkala was very satisfied and unattached to the world. He was equiposed for he could see everything resting in the supersoul and the supersoul present in everyone's heart. By expansion of his knowledge of the Supreme Brahman, he had already attained liberation from the bondage of the body. This liberation is known as nirvana. He was situated in transcendental bliss, and he continued always in that blissful existence, which expanded more and more. This was possible for him by continual practice of bhakti yoga, which is compared to fire, because it burns away all dirty material things. He was always situated in his constitutional position of self-realization, and he could not see anything else but the Supreme Lord and himself engaged in discharging devotional service. Utkala appeared to the less intelligent persons on the road to be foolish, blind, dumb, deaf, and mad, although actually he was not so. He remained like fire covered with ashes without blazing flames. For this reason, the ministers and all the elderly members of the family thought Utkala to be without intelligence and in fact mad. Thus, his younger brother named Vatsara, the son of Brahmi, was elevated to the royal throne and he became king of the world. King Vatsara had a very dear wife whose name was Svarvithi, and she gave birth to 6 sons named Pushparna, Tigmaketu, Isha, Urja, Vasu, and Yaya. Pushparna had 2 wives named Prabha and Dosha. Prabha had 3 sons named Pratar, Madhyandinam, and Sayam. Dosha had 3 sons, Pradosha, Nishita, and Vyushta. Vyushta's wife was named Pushkarini, and she gave birth to a very powerful son named Sarvateya. Sarvateya's wife, Akuti, gave birth to a son named Chakshusha, who became the 6th Manu at the end of the Manu millennium. Nadvala, the wife of Chakshusha, Manu, gave birth to the following faultless sons: Puru, Kutsa, Trita, Dyumna, Satyavan, Ritta, Vrata, Agnishtoma, Atiratra, Pradyumna, Shibi, and Ulmuka. Of the 12 sons, Ulmuka begot 6 sons in his wife Pushkarini. They were all very good sons, and their names were Anga, Sumanna, Kyati, Kratu, Angira, and Gaya. The wife of Anga, Sunita, gave birth to a son named Vena, who was very crooked. The saintly king Anga was very disappointed with Vena's bad character, and he left home and kingdom and went out to the forest. My dear Vidura, when great sages curse their words, when great sages curse, their words are invincible as a thunderbolt. Thus, when they cursed King Vena out of anger, he died. After his death, since there was no king, all the rogues and thieves flourished and kingdom became unregulated, and all the citizens suffered greatly. On seeing this, the great sages took the right hand of Vena as a churning rod, and as a result of their churning, Lord Vishnu in his partial representation made his advent as King Prithu, the original emperor of the world. Vidura inquired from the sage Maitreya,